He tilts his head back by an inch and a half, and the fist flies past. He catches the other guy's wrist softly, almost tenderly. He slams the guy's forehead into the concrete railing. The two remaining men freeze, because a second ago, this kid was kneeling in front of them. A single, dull thud. The body slumps to the floor like a sack of sand. Now let's rewind 10 seconds. The cold of the concrete beneath his knees. The taste of blood and something sour in his mouth. His ribs burn as if they've been run over with rebar. Someone is holding him by the collar of his school uniform and pulling him up. 3 of them are standing over him. Black uniforms, unbuttoned collars, one in leather gloves. And this is where the strangest part begins. A fist flies toward his temple, slowly. So slowly that he has time to think 3 thoughts at once. First, that punch is thrown horribly. The elbow is tucked in. The whole swing is like a neon sign. Second, his hands. Thin, white, childlike. These aren't his hands. Third, he's 17. And he knows this as surely as he knows that a second ago he was 42. He stands up. His knees are shaking, not from fear, from weakness. This body hasn't been trained a single day. His muscles are like wet paper. But his mind is working perfectly. He cracks his neck. A click on the left, a click on the right. He looks at the 2 remaining men. The one with the smirk isn't smiling anymore. His pupils dart around, panic without a plan. Do-yeon steps forward. 1 step, the calm step of a man who knows exactly what will happen next. The guy with the smirk strikes first, a right straight. He telegraphs it a full second in advance. Do-yeon steps half a step to the left, grabs his wrist, twists it. He presses his thumb into the spot below the elbow. The guy howls and falls to one knee. The third is already backing toward the door. Do-yeon doesn't pursue him. He crouches down next to the one on his knees, leans toward his ear. Uttered 4 words so quietly that the wind almost carries them away. The guy turns pale. He stands up. He picks up his friend from the floor, and all 3 of them leave. The door slams. Do-yeon is left alone, staring at his hands. Slender fingers, scrapes on his knuckles. A cheap ring on his pinky, the kind they sell at the station for 1,000 won. He sits down on the concrete. He closes his eyes. For 20 years, he'd woken up in barracks and tents and truck beds and hotel rooms that smelled of bleach. For 20 years, the only scent of morning was gunpowder and coffee from a tin mug. And now, it smells of autumn leaves. He reaches into his pocket. Student E.D. Han Do-yeon, Class 3B, Haesong High School. In the photo, a gaunt face, sunken cheeks, eyes like a dog that's beaten every day and has stopped whimpering. He knows that face. He wore it at 17, in another country, before his mother married an American and took him to California. Before he became Marcus Raid, before the war became his only home. He pulls out his phone. The screen is cracked. 3 missed calls from Mom, not a single message from friends, because he has no friends. The chats are empty. The gallery is empty. Notes. 1 entry. He opens it. 1 sentence. I won't get better. Do-yeon stares at those 4 words for a long time. Then he deletes them, types new ones. Will get. Gets up, goes downstairs. On the 3rd floor, he stops in front of the mirror. Han Do-yeon's face stares back at him. A bruise under his eye, a split lip. But his eyes are different. The eyes of a man who has stared death in the face 12 times. He'll have to learn to hide that look. But not now. Right now, he needs to go home. He gets on the bus. He presses his forehead against the glass. A small town floats by outside the window. Coffee shops, a pharmacy, a bridge over a narrow river, prefab apartment buildings. Everything is small. Everything is quiet. Everything is real. He gets off at the 4th stop. A 5-story building. Entrance 3, 4th floor. His fingers dial the code on their own. The door opens, and the smell hits him like a bullet to the chest. Kimchi, rice, soy sauce. Mom is standing at the stove with her back to him, a small woman in an apron with flowers. She turns around. Her face is tired, wrinkles around her eyes. But her smile is instant and unconditional, the kind you can't fake and can't earn. It's just there, because you're her son. She says dinner's almost ready and asks why he's so late. Do-yeon freezes in the doorway. He hasn't heard that voice in 20 years. For 20 years, he ate from 10 plates in military base mess halls. He sits down at the table. She places a bowl of kimchi jjigae in front of him. He picks up a spoon, scoops up some broth, brings it to his mouth, and freezes. He remembers this taste. Not the memory of his new body, his own, the real one. His mother made exactly this same soup 25 years ago, in Busan, before America, before everything. He eats and can't stop, spoonful after spoonful, bowl after bowl. His mother is surprised that he's eating as if he's been starving for 6 months. Do-yeon looks up. He looks her in the eyes. He replies that he just hasn't had home-cooked food in a long time. She doesn't understand. He ate at home every day, but she doesn't ask. She just serves him seconds. At night, he lies on the narrow bed and stares at the ceiling. The sound of running water comes from the kitchen. His mother is washing the dishes. Then the water stops, and he hears something else, a quiet, stifled sound. She's crying, quietly, so he won't hear. Do-yeon clutches the blanket with both hands. He doesn't know why she's crying, but he knows he'll remember that sound for the rest of his life, no matter how long it turns out to be. He closes his eyes. In the morning, he'll start. He'll get up at 5. He'll do push-ups as many times as he can. He'll run as many blocks as his lungs can handle. He'll come back. He'll take a shower. He'll go to school. And if anyone there touches even one person in his presence, he'll do what he should have done his whole first life. He won't walk by. The alarm went off at 5 in the morning. Do-yeon opened his eyes a second before the alarm sounded. Habit. For 20 years, he'd woken up before any alarm because in war, oversleeping means death. His body protested. Every muscle ached. His ribs throbbed with a dull pain with every breath. He sat up in bed. He looked at his hands. Still thin, still childlike. He stood up. He pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt from the closet. He left the apartment. The stairwell smelled of dampness and old concrete. It was dark outside, an October morning, steam coming from his mouth. He started by walking, a brisk pace down the empty street along the river. After 3 minutes, he started running. After 40 seconds of running, his lungs were on fire. After a minute and 20 seconds, his legs felt like cotton. 2 minutes later, he stopped and put his hands on his knees. 2 blocks. He had run 2 blocks. In his old body, he could run 12 kilometers at full speed on a mountain trail. Now, 2 blocks, and he was gasping for breath like an asthmatic. Do-yeon straightened up. He caught his block. He ran again. He stopped after a block and a half. He caught his breath again. He ran again. He went through 6 cycles like that. Then he returned to the building and did push-ups on the landing by the entrance. 7 of them. On the 8th, his arms gave out and he fell face first onto the cold asphalt. 7 push-ups. He laughed. Quietly, to himself. Because in the Congo, he used to do 120 in a set and thought he was losing his form. He went back to the apartment. His mother had already left for work. Breakfast was on the table, covered with a towel. Rice, scrambled eggs, kimchi. A note. Be sure to eat. I'll be late.
Don't wait up, Mom.
Doyeon sat down and ate slowly, every bite, every sip of water. Not because he was hungry, because he wanted to remember. Shower, uniform, a backpack with a torn strap. He fixed it in 3 minutes using a needle and thread from his mom's jewelry box. Basic skill, field repair of equipment. He left the house at 7:20, bus number 17, Haesong School. The gate, the same security guard, the same drama. Doyeon walked past. The schoolyard in the morning is a different world. Dozens of students, small groups. The hierarchy is visible to the naked eye. Those at the top stood by the entrance, loud, relaxed, with expensive backpacks and the latest model phones. A little further on, the middle class, ordinary, quiet, trying not to draw attention. Against the wall along the fence, the loners, those who go unnoticed, or those who are noticed too often. Doyeon walked across the courtyard and counted the cameras. 4. One above the entrance, one on the corner of the gym, one above the emergency exit, one by the gate, a blind spot behind the gym, a blind spot by the trash cans, a blind spot on the staircase between the second and third floors. 3 places where you could beat someone up and the camera wouldn't see it. He memorized all 3. The hallway, room 3B. He walked in and 30 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Silence. Not the usual morning silence. A different kind. Heavy. The news about yesterday had already spread. The 3 guys from the roof were sitting in their seats. One had a band-aid on his forehead. The second had his arm in a sling. The third just stared at the desk. They didn't look up. Doyeon walked to his desk, the back row, by the window, a spot for those who'd been pushed aside. He sat down, took out his textbook, and for the first time in 20 years, he opened a book not on tactics or survival, but on Korean literature. The first lesson passed as if in a fog. The teacher spoke about the poetry of the Joseon era. Doyeon listened while simultaneously scanning the classroom. A habit. In any new room, the first 10 minutes are spent assessing the situation. Park Sung-ho sat in the center of the front row, 6 feet tall even while seated. Broad shoulders, short haircut, custom-made uniform. The watch on his wrist cost more than Doyeon's entire apartment. 2 guys next to him, his regulars. One big, with a bull's neck, the other skinny and quick. Sung-ho didn't look at Doyeon. That was worse than if he had looked. A man who doesn't look at you after humiliating you hasn't forgotten. He's planning something. During the break, Doyeon went out into the hallway. He headed for the water fountains at the end of the floor. Halfway there, he heard a sound, quiet, like a rustle. He stopped at the stairwell between the second and third floors, a blind spot for the cameras, he knew it. Down on the landing, 2 high school seniors were standing. A girl was crouching in front of them. School uniform, headphones around her neck. Her hair covered her face. One of the guys was holding her backpack above her head. The other was whispering something nasty to her. Doyeon assessed the situation in a second and a half. 2 of them, both bigger than his new body, but both relaxed, both certain that no one could see them, both standing close together. He walked down the steps, not quickly, at a normal pace, as if he were just walking by. The first guy turned to him and said this spot was taken and that he go another way. Doyeon stopped. He looked at him, then at the second guy, then at the girl. She looked up, big eyes, tear streaks, fear. Doyeon stood between her and them. He just stood there. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't take a fighting stance. He just stood there and watched. The first guy took a step toward him. Doyeon didn't move.
He looked the guy in the eyes and waited. 3 seconds. 5. 7. On the 9th second, the guy looked away.
He dropped his backpack on the floor. He told his buddy to get out of there. They left. Doyeon didn't turn to look after them. He picked up the backpack, dusted it off, held it out to the girl. She took it with both hands and pressed it to her chest. Doyeon asked if she was okay. He told her she didn't have to answer out loud, just nod or shake her head. She nodded. He nodded back and walked away. During lunch break, he sat on a bench in the courtyard with a cheap sandwich from the school store. He read his textbook. The sun peeked out from behind the clouds and everything turned golden. The leaves on the trees, the water in the broken fountain, the dust in the air. He took a bite of his sandwich. White bread, tuna, mayonnaise. It tasted like cardboard. But he ate it and felt good, because no one was shooting, no one was shouting over the radio, no one was bleeding to death 3 meters away from him. Just autumn, just the schoolyard, just a sandwich. A girl approached him.
He sensed her coming from 4 steps away, light on her feet, low heels, an expensive school bag. She stopped in front of him. He looked up. Yoon Ha-in, class president. He knew her name from the magazine he'd flipped through during the first period. Top of the class, neat, perfect bangs, perfect posture, perfect nails. Her face was as calm as the surface of a lake on a windless day. She asked if she could sit down. Doyeon moved over. She sat on the edge of the bench, straight, with her back straight, just like during an exam. She said she'd heard about what happened yesterday on the roof. Doyeon chewed his sandwich and waited. She said she wanted to understand what had changed, that he'd sat at the back of the classroom for 3 years and never once raised his hand. Not once had he responded when people shoved him in the hallway. Not once had he looked anyone in the eye, and yesterday he took down 3 of them on the roof. Doyeon finished chewing, swallowed. Said he'd simply decided to stop falling. Ha-in looked at him for 3 seconds. Then she stood up. She said that wasn't an explanation, and she left. Doyeon watched her go. Perfect posture, perfect stride, not a single unnecessary movement. He'd seen people like that, in headquarters, in bosses' offices. People who control everything around them because nothing inside them is under control. He finished his sandwich, crumpled the wrapper, threw it in the trash can. Last class. P.E. The gym. Doyeon changed in the locker room. The body in the mirror was pitiful. Skinny arms, sticking out ribs, old bruises on his back, yellow and purple. They were several days old. Some were a week old. He'd been beaten regularly, for a long time. He pulled on a t-shirt. He went out into the gym. The PE teacher announced that today they'd be playing basketball. They split into teams. Doyeon ended up on the one with the quietest kids, against Sono's team. A coincidence, or maybe not. Doyeon didn't play. He stood in the corner of the court and watched. Sonyo moved well, a boxer's coordination, quick feet, strong arms. But a fighter's habits. He wouldn't pass the ball. He went for contact even when he could have gone around. He dominated physically. Twice he crashed into a player from Doyeon's team so hard that the guy fell. The teacher didn't blow the whistle. No one blew the whistle. The third time, Sonyo drove to the basket through a short guy on Doyeon's team. The guy was standing in the way. Sonyo didn't go around him. He rammed into him with his shoulder. The guy flew back and fell on his back. He hit the back of his head. He lay there and didn't get up. The coach shouted that everything was fine and to keep going. Doyeon walked over to the fallen player. He crouched down beside him. He checked his pupils. They were equal. Good. He asked how many fingers he was holding up. The guy answered correctly. No concussion, just a concussion. Doyeon helped him sit up.
He told him to sit for 5 minutes and not get up. Then he stood up and looked at Sonho. Sonho was standing with the ball in his hands, looking at him, for the first time that day. Their eyes met. Doyeon didn't look away. He just stood there and looked, calmly, without defiance, without fear, like looking at the weather outside the window. A fact. It's raining. Not good and not bad. Just rain. Sonho was the first to look away. He dropped the ball and walked toward the bench. The game continued without him. After school, Doyeon walked to the bus stop. 2 people were following him. He could hear their footsteps 30 meters behind him. Not Sonho. Not his people. Others. He turned into an alley between a stationery store and a pharmacy. He stopped. He turned around. 2 guys. Older. Not from school. Leather jackets. One with a chain on his belt. The other was chewing gum. They stopped 3 meters away.
The one with the chain said he'd heard that some cocky guy had shown up at Haesong School. Said they had their own rules here. Said he should come by the park near the bridge after school tomorrow and talk. Doyeon listened. He assessed them. The chain on the belt, not a weapon, an accessory. Hands in pockets, not ready to fight. His voice was steady, but his eyes darted around. They came to intimidate, not to fight. A youth gang. The very ones who run the school fights. Doyeon said he'd think about it. They left. He got on the bus. He rode home and thought. The 3 on the roof were just a warm-up. Sonho was a tougher challenge, but a gang was a whole different level. At school, he can play on fear and surprise. On the streets, the rules are different. There aren't school kids there, but people who fight for money. He got off at his stop. He went up to the 4th floor. He opened the door. Mom wasn't there. 3 shifts. He cooked some rice. He heated up the leftover soup.
He ate alone. Then he sat on the floor in his room and started doing push-ups. 8. 1 more than this morning. Then sit-ups. 12 crunches. Then stretching. His body groaned. Every movement came through pain. But the pain was familiar. Honest. Not like the bruises from someone else's fists. He had chosen this pain himself. He lay on his back and stared at the ceiling. 4 days in this body. 7 push-ups in the morning, 8 in the evening. 2 blocks of running. He needed at least 2 months to get his body to a baseline level. 6 months to get back into shape. A year to get back to where he was in his previous life. He didn't have a year. Problems were already lining up. He closed his eyes. Nothing. He'd handled worse situations. The next morning began with 9 push-ups and 3 blocks of running. Progress. Microscopic, but real. Doyeon took a cold shower, got dressed. He ate the breakfast his mother had left covered with a towel. Rice and an omelet with green onions.
A note on the table. I'll be home by midnight. Don't forget to lock the door, Mom. He put the note in his pocket. The bus, school, the gates. This time, a group was standing at the entrance. 5 people. In the center, Park Suno. On either side were his 2 regulars. Behind them were 2 more whom Doyeon was seeing for the first time. Bigger, older, not from their class. Maybe from 3A, maybe from 3B. Newcomers. Suno had brought in reinforcements. Doyeon walked toward the entrance at his usual pace. He didn't slow down. He didn't speed up. Suno stepped toward him, blocked his path. The entire schoolyard froze. 30, 40 students. Everyone was watching. No one moved. Suno stood there looking down at him. A height difference of 15 centimeters. A weight difference of 30 kilograms. Doyeon stopped. a distance of 1.5 meters, striking range. If Suno attacks with his right, Doyeon has half a second to react. Enough. Suno didn't attack. He just stood there
and said nothing. 12 seconds, Doyeon counted. 4 seconds. 6. 8. On the 10th second, Sonho swallowed. A micro-movement, invisible to everyone except a man who had spent 20 years reading people down to the smallest detail. His throat twitched. His Adam's apple rose and fell. Fear. He was afraid. This 6'3" boxer turned bodyguard, the son of a congressman with 4 bodyguards behind him, was afraid of the skinny kid he'd been beating up for 3 years. Because of the eyes. Doyeon's eyes spoke a language Sonho didn't understand, but sensed on an instinctive level. The language of a man who had killed. 12 seconds. Doyeon spoke quietly, so that only the two of them could hear. He said he could see an old fracture on Sonho's right wrist, a poorly healed one. Sonho flinched. Doyeon continued in the same tone. He said that if he struck a certain spot, Sonho wouldn't just break his arm, he would lose it. He said he knew this because he had done something similar to a bigger man. He said that man was now in a wheelchair. Then Doyeon raised his hand, slowly. He touched the spot on Sonho's wrist with his index finger, gently, like a doctor during an exam. Sonho pulled his hand away, quickly, reflexively. Doyeon told him to go home. Silence. Sonho stood there for another 3 seconds, then he turned around and walked away. The 4 followed him, not a word, not a glance back. The entire schoolyard was silent. Doyeon stood there and heard his heart pounding, fast, too fast. The adrenaline had worn off and his legs felt weak. If Sonho had hit him, if those 4 had attacked at once, out in the open courtyard, with no walls or corners, he would have lost. He would have gone down in a minute. A bluff, a pure bluff. And it worked. Doyeon walked toward the entrance. A girl was standing by the fountain with her textbooks. He recognized her. Yoon Ha-in. She was looking at him. The textbooks fell from her hands. She didn't notice. Doyeon walked past. The classroom was quiet. He sat down at his desk. He opened his textbook. His hands were shaking, slightly and rapidly. He placed them on his lap under the desk and waited for them to stop. During the first class, the boy sitting next to him turned around, a small guy with glasses. He whispered, asking what Doyeon had said to Sonho. Doyeon replied that he had said good morning. The guy with glasses stared at him. Then he turned away. During recess, Doyeon went out into the hallway and bumped into the girl he had saved yesterday on the stairs. She was standing against the wall with a notebook in her hands. She saw him. She froze. Then she quickly held out the notebook. He took it. He opened it. Inside was a drawing, in pencil, the silhouette of a person standing between 2 shadows. The face wasn't drawn, just the pose. A straight back, arms at his sides, calm. Under the drawing, 1 word. Thank you. Doyeon looked at her. She didn't look up. He asked her name. She opened her mouth, tried to speak. Her voice broke after the first sound, a rasp. She pressed her lips together. She blushed, reached into her pocket, pulled out a pen, wrote on her palm. Jung Min-soo. Doyeon nodded, said the drawing was good. She smiled slightly, the first smile he'd seen on that face, fleeting, like a flash, and it faded just as quickly. She took her notebook and left, quickly, almost running. Doyeon watched her go, headphones around her neck, slumped shoulders, the gait of someone used to being small and unnoticed. He knew people like that. He'd seen them in refugee camps. Children who'd gone unnoticed for so long that they themselves began to believe they didn't exist.
After the fourth period, he was called to the dean's office, an office on the first floor, a door with a nameplate. Dean of Student Affairs, Chae Kyung-soo. Do-yeon entered. The office was small, a desk, 2 chairs, a cabinet with files,
a window with blinds. The dean was sitting at the desk, a man in his 50s, a round face, glasses with thin frames. His tie was askew, tired eyes. He pointed to a chair. Do-yeon sat down. The dean said he had received a complaint. 3 students had gone to the infirmary with injuries. One of them was the son of a respected man. Do-yeon remained silent. The dean said that the school did not condone violence, that it didn't matter who started it, that a fight was a fight, that if something like this happened again, there would be consequences. Do-yeon listened and looked at the wall behind the dean's head. A photograph hung there, a group photo of students, smiling faces. One face was outlined in a black frame, a small one, almost imperceptible. But Do-yeon noticed it. He asked who the student in the photo was. The vice principal hesitated. He looked at the wall, then back at Do-yeon. He said it had nothing to do with the conversation. Do-yeon said it was relevant. He said he knew that 3 months ago, a student had fallen from the roof of this school. He said he knew they'd called it an accident. He said he knew that the very same people who were now complaining about him were involved. The vice principal turned pale. He took off his glasses, wiped them, put them back on. He told Do-yeon he'd better be careful with such statements, that these were serious accusations, that without evidence, it was slander. Do-yeon stood up. He said that evidence wasn't his concern. He said his concern was that no one else would fall from the roof. He walked out. In the hallway, he exhaled, slowly, checking his pulse. The vice principal knew, everyone knew, and everyone kept quiet. Not out of malice, out of fear. The school was afraid of a scandal. The principal was afraid of losing his reputation. The teachers were afraid of losing their jobs. The bully's parents were too influential. The system. He had seen systems like this. In every country where he had fought, small tyrannies, small acts of cowardice, big consequences. After school, he didn't go to the bridge. He didn't go to meet with the gang. Instead, he went to the library. He sat in the far corner. He opened his phone, and he started searching. Park Hong-gu, city councilman, construction company. Do-yeon read articles, interviews, press releases. He pieced together the picture. An hour later, he had a map, not complete, but enough to get started. Hong-gu owned a construction company that built half the buildings in the city. His wife was on the hospital's board of directors. His older brother was the chief of the local police department. A family, a clan, controlling the city through connections and money, not through official authority. Sun-ho wasn't just a hooligan, he was an heir. And his behavior at school wasn't teenage rebellion, but training. His father was raising a wolf. Do-yeon hung up the phone. He leaned back in his chair. He had fought rebels in the Congo, cartels in Colombia, cells in Syria. But a councilman from a small Korean town, with his construction company and a police force under his thumb, was a different kind of opponent. He couldn't be neutralized physically. He had to be outmaneuvered. And for that, he needed allies, information, time. He left the library. It was getting dark. The school was emptying out. Hee-yeon was sitting on a bench by the exit, with a thermos, alone. She saw him, stood up, came over, held out the thermos, said it was tea, that it was cold outside, that she didn't know why she'd brought it. Do-yeon took the thermos, opened it, took a sip. Hot barley tea. He said thank you. She nodded. She stood there and didn't leave. Then she asked if it was true what he'd told the vice principal, about the student who'd fallen off the roof. Do-yeon looked at her. He asked how she knew what he'd told the vice principal. She replied that the vice principal's office was next to the teacher's lounge. The walls were thin. Do-yeon nodded. He said it was true. Hyun was silent for 5 seconds. Then she said she knew. That she'd been class president when it happened. That she'd seen him being bullied. That she hadn't done anything. Her voice was steady. Her face was calm. But her hands were clenching the strap of her school bag so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Do-yeon didn't tell her that she could have done more. He didn't say it wasn't her fault. He just said that she was here now, and that was already something. Hyun looked up at him. In her eyes was something he'd seen in the mirrors of field hospitals after long surgeries. Exhaustion. Not physical. The kind that's in your bones. She said it was time for her to go. She turned around. She left. Her step was steady. Her back was straight. Do-yeon finished his tea. He set the thermos on the bench.
She would come back for it in the morning. He knew it. On Saturday, Do-yeon didn't go to school. Day off. He woke up at 5, got dressed, went outside. Run. 4 blocks. A record. His lungs were burning, but not like they had a week ago. His body had adapted. Slowly, but it had adapted. Push-ups, 12. Sit-ups, 20. Squats, 30. Then he stood by the river and looked at the water. Gray, cold. October was turning into November. The air smelled of fallen leaves and smoke from someone's chimney. He went back home. His mother was in the kitchen. For the first time in a week, he saw her in the morning. She didn't work on state. Her face was bare of makeup, bags under her eyes. Her hands were red from the water. She smiled when he came in and said the pancakes were almost ready. Hotok, sweet Korean pancakes filled with brown sugar and nuts. They ate together, in silence. Do-yeon watched her and took it all in. How she held her chopsticks, how she touches a hot piece, how she tucks her hair behind her ear. Little things. The very little things he hadn't noticed in his first life when he was actually 17. She asked if everything was okay at school. Do-yeon said everything was fine. She said she'd gotten a call from the vice principal. Do-yeon stopped chewing. She said the vice principal had told her about the fight, that he'd said Do-yeon had attacked 3 classmates, that the victim's parents might file a complaint, that she needed to come to school on Monday. Her voice didn't tremble, but she was looking at the table, not at him. Do-yeon put down his chopsticks. He said he hadn't attacked anyone, that he'd been beaten on the roof and had defended himself. She looked up. She asked why he hadn't told her. He replied that he didn't want her to worry. She covered her face with her hands, quietly, without a sound. Her shoulders didn't shake, but Do-yeon saw how her fingers had turned white. She said that he always said that he didn't want to worry her, that for 3 years he had come home with bruises and said he had fallen, that she knew. She always knew. And she couldn't do anything because those boys' parents were too influential. Because if she complained, she'd be fired. And if she was fired, they'd lose their apartment. Do-yeon sat and listened, and he understood. The Do-yeon of the past hadn't stayed silent because he was weak. He'd stayed silent because he was protecting his mother, the only way he knew how. He endured it, so she wouldn't lose her job. Do-yeon reached across the table and placed his hand on hers. Small, dry, warm. He said it wouldn't be like this anymore, that he would figure it out, that she didn't need to come to school on Monday, that he would talk to the vice principal himself. She looked at him, and again the same expression, just like Ha-in's, just like everyone else at this school. Confusion, because sitting in front of her was her son,
speaking like a grown man. She said he seemed like a different person. Doyeon smiled. He said he'd just grown up. After breakfast, he washed the dishes. His mother sat down on the couch and turned on the TV. 5 minutes later, she fell asleep. Doyeon covered her with a blanket. He stood nearby. He looked at her face. Wrinkles. Dry lips. Her hands were clenched into fists even in her sleep. A woman who works 3 shifts so her son can go to a school where he gets beaten up. He left the apartment quietly, closed the door, and walked to the bridge. The park by the bridge was small. 3 benches, a playground with rusty swings, a few trees. 4 people were standing behind the trees. The same 2 who used to approach him after school, plus 2 more. One of the new ones was older, about 20, maybe 22. A scar on his eyebrow. Hands not in his pockets, at his sides. Ready. This one hadn't come to scare him. Doyeon approached, stopped 4 meters away, assessed the situation. 4 of them, an open space. Bad. The swings to the right, a bench to the left, a tree behind him, 2 escape routes, the bridge and the street behind the park. The older one spoke first, introduced himself. Chul. He said he was in charge of this area, that Haesong's school was on his turf, that a certain amount was collected from the students every month and sent up the chain, that Seonho had been their contact at the school, that Doyeon had broken the system, that now either Doyeon takes Seonho's place and the system keeps running, or Doyeon is in trouble. Doyeon listened. A classic scheme. Extortion through the students. The older guys provide protection. The younger ones collect. The teachers don't see it. The parents don't know. Or they pretend not to. He asked how much they collected per month. Chul named a figure. 300,000 won per class. 10 high school classes. 3 million a month. Peanuts by adult standards, but for school kids, a fortune. Doyeon did the math in his head. 3 million. About $2,500. For that money, 4 half-grown guys control the school. Cheap. He told Chul he wouldn't collect the money. Chul nodded, said there would be trouble then. He took a step closer. Doyeon didn't move. He looked at Chul and took him in. A scar on his eyebrow. Old, but healed cleanly. So they stitched it up. So not a street cut, but something serious. His hands were sinewy. His knuckles were worn down. This guy fights regularly. Not a boxer. Street style. Sweeping punches. Close quarters combat. Doyeon weighed his chances. 1-on-1, he could win. Chul was stronger and heavier, but predictable. 1 against 4 in the park, no walls, no narrow passages, no advantage of terrain. No, not now. Not with this body. He told Chul he was giving him a week. Chul laughed, asked what the week was for. Doyeon said that in a week, Chul would come to him himself and ask for another talk, on different terms. Chul stopped laughing. He looked at him.
Doyeon held his gaze. Chul spat. He said, "A week." And they left. Doyeon stood in the park and breathed, deeply, evenly. Another bluff, but this time with a deadline. A week. In a week, he needed to find leverage against Chul or find a way to make racketeering at school unprofitable. Or he'd get beaten up, or worse. He walked home, thinking as he went. At the bridge, he stopped. He looked at the water, a gray river, yellow leaves on the surface. A simple world, simple problems. No one is shooting. No one is mining the road. Just 4 guys from the neighborhood want money. Just a councilman wants power. Just the school wants peace. He smirked. Simple problems, but people die from them just as dead as from a bullet. At home, his mother was still asleep. He sat down at the table. He took out a notebook. He began to write. Names, connections, schemes. Park Hong-gu at the top. Sun-ho at school. Chul on the street. A line between them. Money flows from the bottom up.
Fear flows from the top down. Classic. He wrote for 2 hours. Then he hid the notebook under the mattress. He lay down. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow is Sunday. 1 more day to prepare. On Monday, the real war will begin. Not the kind with fists and kicks, the kind with information and tactics, the kind he was truly good at. Monday, the 6th day in his new body. 14 push-ups in the morning. A 5-block run. His ribs didn't hurt anymore. The bruises on his back had turned yellow and shrunk. His body was changing. Not strong yet, but no longer dead. Doyeon arrived at school early, 7:05 a.m. The hallways were empty. He walked to the vice principal's office. The door was closed. He sat down on a bench across from it and waited. At 7:20, Vice Principal Che arrived. He saw Doyeon. He froze for a second. Then he opened the door and gestured for him to come in. Doyeon entered. He sat down. The dean sat across from him. Doyeon spoke first. He said he knew the vice principal had called his mother. He said his mother wouldn't be coming. He said that instead, he wanted to tell the vice principal exactly what had happened on the roof and what happens at the school every day. The vice principal began to say that the procedure required the parents' presence. Doyeon raised his hand. Quietly, without aggression, just a gesture meaning, wait. And the vice principal fell silent. He didn't understand why himself. Doyeon spoke, briefly, without emotion, like a post-operative report. 3 students had been systematically beating him on the roof after school, at least twice a week, for 6 months. The blows were aimed at his torso and ribs so as not to leave visible marks. He named names, dates, places, information he had extracted from his body's memory over the past few days. His body remembered every blow, every humiliation. The vice principal listened. His face was stony. Doyeon finished with the facts and added one more thing. He said that Lee Jun-ho, whom everyone remembers as having died from stress before exams, had been subjected to the same thing, by the same people. The vice principal took his glasses. He placed them on the table. He rubbed his eyes. He said these were serious accusations, that without evidence, the school couldn't take action, that the father of one of the students was a city council member. Doyeon stood up. He walked over to the table. He leaned in, not to threaten, just to close the distance. He said he wasn't asking the school to take action. He said he was asking for only one thing, that on Monday, when Doyeon's mother didn't come, the vice principal wouldn't call her again, wouldn't scare her, wouldn't threaten her with consequences. Because this woman works 3 shifts, and the last thing she needs is calls from the school where her son is being beaten, and the administration calling her with complaints. The vice principal looked up at him. He was silent. Then he nodded. Once. Doyeon left. He exhaled in the hallway. A first small victory. Not strategic, tactical. They won't be bothering his mother. That's enough for today. First class, math. Doyeon sat at the back of the classroom and solved equations. Easily. School math, after 20 years of calculating ballistics and coordinates, was like a coloring book for an adult. He finished all the problems in 10 minutes and spent the rest of the class staring out the window. The leaves were still falling, but there were fewer of them. November was approaching. During recess, Dahi came up to him. He didn't know her name until she introduced herself. Red hair, dyed, bright, provocative. The school hated that hair, but she wore it like a flag. An earring, a spiked bracelet, an unbuttoned jacket. Everything screamed, "Stay away." But her eyes were different. Warm, alert. Like a cat that wants to approach but is afraid of being kicked. She asked point blank, was he the boss now or not? Because she needed to know who to pay for protection. Doyeon laughed. For the first time in his life. A real laugh. Not polite, not tactical. A laugh of surprise. She stood before him with her fists in her pockets and a serious expression, talking about protection like an officer at a briefing. He replied that he owed nothing to anyone, including himself, and asked if she wanted a sandwich. Dahi blinked. Then she sat down next to him, took half of his sandwich, took a bite, chewed and looked at him. Said he was strange. Doyeon agreed. She said she knew Min-soo, that Min-soo was her friend, her only one, that Min-soo had shown her a drawing she'd made for him, that Min-soo hadn't drawn people for 2 years, ever since they started bullying her. Doyeon stopped chewing. 2 years. This girl hadn't drawn people for 2 years. And then she drew him. Because he simply stood between her and who were hurting her.
Dahi said that if he hurt Min-soo, she would personally beat his kidneys in with a bass guitar. Doyeon said he took note. Dahi nodded. She stood up. She left. Then she stopped. She turned around. She said the sandwich wasn't bad. During the 3rd class, something happened that Doyeon hadn't expected. A girl he'd never seen before peeked into the classroom. A senior uniform, but a different cut, more expensive, custom made. Her hair was styled perfectly. Her makeup was subtle but professional. On her wrist was a watch that cost as much as a car. She scanned the classroom. Her gaze found Doyeon. She looked at him for 3 seconds, then she left. His deskmate, wearing glasses, leaned over and whispered that it was Park Sun-ha, Sun-ho's older sister, a senior. Or, as they say here, a graduating class from another school. She transferred here 2 months ago, the daughter of a congressman. Doyeon remembered. At lunch, he sat at his table, alone, a sandwich, a textbook.
A routine that had become familiar. She walked over to him across the courtyard. Her step was confident. Her posture was straight, but not like Ha-in's. Ha-in's posture came from discipline. This one's came from pride, or from the habit of everyone watching her. She stopped in front of him. Doyeon looked up. The line of her cheekbones. He'd seen that line that morning, on Sun-ho's face. Same blood. She didn't introduce herself, didn't ask if she could sit down. She just stood there and looked at him the way people look at an exhibit in a museum. Doyeon said he could tell she was Sun-ho's sister, that it was evident from the line of her cheekbones. He added that she shouldn't worry, that he wasn't going to hurt her brother, as long as he didn't hurt others. Sun-ho flinched, a micro-movement. Her eyebrows dropped a millimeter. Her lips tightened. Her hands. He saw her hands. They were trembling, slightly. She hid them behind her bag, but Doyeon saw. She turned and walked away.
At a brisk pace. She didn't run. Her pride wouldn't let her. But she wanted to. Doyeon watched her go. She knew what her brother was doing. She'd known for a long time, and she was ashamed. Not for herself, for the family name. After class, he walked out through the main entrance. Ha-in was standing by the gate, a thermos in her hand. That very one. Do-yeon approached. She held out the thermos to him and said it was his. He replied that he'd left it on a bench on Saturday. She said she knew, that she'd picked it up, that she'd washed it, that she'd refilled it. Barley tea, just like last time. Do-yeon took it, took a sip. Hot, perfect temperature. He said thank you. She nodded and asked where he was going. He replied that he was going home. She said it was on her way. It was a lie. Do-yeon knew where she lived because her address was in the school yearbook. She was going the other way. But he didn't say anything. They walked together, in silence, down a street lined with yellow trees.
Past coffee shops and pharmacies, past the bridge. She was silent and he was silent, and that was fine. Two people who didn't know how to talk, just walking side by side. At the bus stop, she stopped. She said this was where she was going. Do-yeon nodded. She hesitated. Then she asked if he ate anything besides sandwiches. Do-yeon said his mom cooked, but a sandwich was more convenient at school. Hyun was silent for a moment. Then she said she'd bring him something proper tomorrow. Do-yeon started to say it wasn't necessary. She had already gotten on the bus. The doors closed. The bus drove away. Do-yeon stood at the bus stop, with a thermos. And he thought, 42 years, 12 conflicts, 137 confirmed combat operations. And not a single one of them had prepared him for a 17-year-old girl bringing him tea and offering him lunch. He got on the next bus. He was riding home. He thought about the week ahead. Chol was waiting for an answer.
Sonia was silent, which was more dangerous than shouting. G Group was watching. The vice principal knew, but was afraid to act. And Do-yeon sat on the bus with a thermos of barley tea and smiled. Because for the first time in a very long time, he didn't just have enemies. At home, he ate his mother's dinner, rice with braised pork and kimchi. His mother sat across from him and talked about work, about the boss who's always complaining, about a coworker who brought homemade rice cakes, about how the store near the station has a sale on winter jackets and maybe she could buy him a new one. Do-yeon listened, nodded, asked questions. She looked at him in surprise because he used to eat in silence and go to his room. Now he sat and listened, and he was interested. Every word, every little detail. Because this was life, real, ordinary, living life. The kind he'd never had. After dinner, he locked himself in his room. He pulled the notebook from under his mattress. He added new entries.
Park Son-ha, older sister, family conflict, potential contact. Yoon Ha-in, class president, guilt, potential ally. Kim Da-hee, Min-soo's protector, loyal, straightforward, potential friend. Jung Min-soo, silent, draws, needs protection. He looked at the list. 4 names. 4 people who had approached him on their own over the past week, each with their own reason, each with their own pain. He closed the notebook, lay down on the bed, stared at the ceiling. In a week, Chol would come for an answer. In a week, Son-ho would stop being silent. In a week, everything would get more complicated. But right now, behind the wall, his mother was washing dishes and humming a song. A quiet one, an old one. He didn't remember the words, but he remembered the melody. From his first life. From Busan. From the kitchen that smelled of rice and kimchi and soap. He closed his eyes and listened. And for the first time in 20 years, he fell asleep without an alarm clock in his head. Tuesday, day 7. 16 push-ups, 6 blocks of running. His body was starting to obey. Not like a tool, not yet, but like a rough draft of a tool. But his muscles were already responding to commands without a half-second delay. Do-yeon arrived at school and found a lunchbox on his desk. White, with a lid. No note. He opened it. Rice, fried chicken, pickled vegetables, an egg roll. Everything arranged perfectly, just like in a magazine. He looked at Hyun. She was sitting at the front desk looking at her textbook. She didn't turn around, but the tips of her ears were red. Do-yeon closed the lunchbox, put it in his bag. At lunch, he ate at his own desk. He opened the box. The first piece of chicken, cooked to perfection, crispy skin, juicy inside. He chewed slowly, savored it. At the military base in Djibouti, there was a contract cook from Louisiana who fried chicken so well that there was a line of 30 mercenaries waiting for it. This was better. He finished everything, down to the last grain of rice. After class, he washed the lunchbox in the school restroom, wiped it with a towel. He walked up to Hyun at the exit. He held it out. She took it. She didn't look at it. He said it was delicious. She nodded. He said the chicken was perfect. She hesitated. Then she quietly said it was her first time cooking it, that she'd watched a video online, that she'd overcooked it 3 times before getting it right. Do-yeon stopped. He looked at her, the girl who ranked first in the school and whose every minute was scheduled until graduation, had fried the chicken 3 times that night just to bring him lunch. He didn't know what to say. 20 years of hostage negotiations and interrogations, and he didn't know what to say to a 17-year-old girl who had overcooked the chicken twice for his sake. He said he'd bring her something in return tomorrow. She quickly said it wasn't necessary and left, faster than usual. Do-yeon stood at the gate and felt something shifting inside him. Tectonic, slow, dangerous. He knew that feeling. Attachment. He suppressed it, not the time, not the place, not now. That evening he sat at home thinking about Chol. 5 days until the deadline. He needed leverage. He picked up his phone, opened a search engine, started digging. Not Chol. Chol was a soldier. He needed someone above Chol. 2 hours of searching. Forums, local news sites, classifieds, court records that were publicly available. And he found it. The youth gang that Chol represented wasn't independent. It was part of a network controlled by one man, the owner of a chain of convenience stores and 2 karaoke in the city center. An Tae-jin. Do-yeon dug deeper. 2 years ago, An Tae-jin had testified as a witness in a case involving illegal gambling. The case was closed. The witness testimony had vanished. Who closed the case? An investigator from the district prosecutor's office. The investigator's last name sounded familiar. Do-yeon checked. Park Hong-gu's cousin. The congressman. Sun-ho's father. The circle was complete. Hong-gu, An Tae-jin, Chol, Sun-ho. The vertical chain. The councilman protects the businessman. The businessman supports the gang. The gang protects the school. The school stays silent. Money and fear flow down the same pipe from top to bottom. Do-yeon wrote it all down in his notebook. He slammed it shut, sat down on the bed. The leverage wasn't in his power. The leverage was in the connection. If this connection became public, a city councilman linked to a youth gang that extorts school children. This isn't a school scandal. This is a criminal case. He needed evidence, not rumors, not guesswork. Facts that could be presented. Photographs, recordings, documents. He lay down, stared at the ceiling. In Yemen, he once compiled a dossier on a field commander in 3 days, which was later used to eliminate him. 3 days. A chain of informants, intercepted messages,
satellite photos. Here he had neither informants nor satellites, just an old phone and public records. But the principle was the same. Find the weak link, apply pressure, get information. The weak link. He closed his eyes and ran through the options. Chol was no good, loyal, tough, won't break under pressure. The two who came with him, minions, know nothing. Ande-jin, too high up, out of reach for a high schooler. That leaves Seon-ho. Seon-ho, who's been silent for a week. Seon-ho, who knows about Chol, about the money, and about the system. Seon-ho, who was humiliated in front of the school and is biding his time. Do-yeon opened his eyes. He needs to talk to Seon-ho. Not threaten him, not to pressure him. To talk. Like an adult to an adult. Wednesday morning. 18 push-ups, 7 blocks, school. A lunchbox on the desk again, this time with a note. 2 words. Enjoy your meal. The handwriting was perfect.
Like it was written from a textbook. Do-yeon put the note in his pocket. After the second class, he found Seon-ho. He was standing behind the gym, alone, a blind spot for the cameras, smoking. Do-yeon approached. Seon-ho saw him. He dropped the cigarette, clenched his fists. Do-yeon stopped 3 meters away, raised his hands, palms forward. A gesture of open hands. Not a threat, a conversation. Seon-ho didn't relax, but he didn't strike. Do-yeon said he hadn't come to fight. Seon-ho asked why he was there then. Do-yeon said he wanted to ask one question. Seon-ho was silent. Do-yeon asked if he knew Lee Jun-ho. Seon-ho flinched, as if from a blow. His face changed. For a split second, Do-yeon didn't see a thug. Not the son of a congressman. Not a boxer. A boy. A frightened boy. Then the mask returned. Seon-ho said he didn't know what he was talking about. Do-yeon said he knew. He said that Jun-ho had been bullied by the same people who had bullied him. He said that Seon-ho was among them.
Or knew about them. Or had seen it. Seon-ho told Do-yeon to shut up. His voice grew louder, but not angry, frightened. Do-yeon continued. He said that Jun-ho was dead, that everyone knows how, that no one wants to know why, and that sooner or later someone will ask, and then everyone will have to answer, including Sung-ho. Sung-ho took a step forward. Do-yeon didn't back down. Sung-ho stood there, breathing heavily. His eyes were shining, not with anger. Do-yeon saw it. He told Sung-ho that he wasn't his enemy, that he hadn't come here to seek revenge, that he didn't want anyone else to die. Sung-ho looked at him for 10 seconds. Then he said one sentence. He said it wasn't him. That it wasn't the students who drove Jun-ho to it, that there were others, people from outside. Then he turned and walked away. Do-yeon stood behind the gym. Not the students, people from outside. Chol, or someone from An Tae-jin's people. A gang had driven Jun-ho to the roof.
And the school had chalked it up to exam stress. The picture was getting darker. This wasn't just extortion. It was murder. Slow, systematic, disguised. And if Do-yeon was right, then Jun-ho wasn't the only one. He returned to class, sat down at his desk. He opened his textbook. His hands didn't shake. He had long since stopped trembling at the sight of information. But inside, something tightened. Cold, familiar. That feeling he had before every operation when he knew things would go badly and there was nowhere to retreat. At lunch, he ate a lunchboxed lunch from Ha Inn, rice with beef and spinach. She was sitting far away again and wasn't looking at him. He ate and thought. 4 days. 4 days until Chul. He needed to hurry. After class, he didn't go home. He went to the city library. He found a computer with internet access. He started searching for An Daejin, karaoke bars, late-night shops, addresses, hours of operation, the names of employees that popped up in reviews. One bar was called the Blue Whale. Doyeon found the bar's page on social media, photos, the interior, followers, and one photo in which An Tae-jin was standing at the bar with 2 people. One of them was Chul, young, no scar, a photo from 2 years ago. The second person in the photo was wearing a suit. His face was partially hidden, but Doyeon saw the watch on his wrist. Expensive. The very same one. He had seen one like that on Song-ho's wrist, a family model, a gift from his father. Park Hong-gu, a congressman, in a photo with the gang leader and his enforcer. Doyeon saved the photo to his phone. A screenshot, the date, the geolocation. Not enough for a trial, but enough to apply pressure. He left the library. It was getting dark, a November evening. The streetlights glowed yellow. The road home passed by a bridge. He stopped in the middle. He looked down. Dark water, yellow reflections of the streetlights. Where Junho had walked here 3 months ago. Maybe he stood in this very spot. Maybe he looked at the same water and thought the same thoughts. Only Junho didn't have 20 years of war in his head. He had only fear and loneliness, and no one to stand between him and those who were breaking him. Doyeon gripped the railing, cold metal. He stood there for a minute, then he went home. On Thursday, waiting for him on his desk was not only a lunchbox, but also a note from Minsu. It lay inside a folded sheet of paper. On the sheet was a new drawing, the same silhouette, but this time with a face. His face. Not idealized, not handsome. Real, thin, sharp, with dark circles under his eyes. But the eyes in the drawing were alive, bright. She had drawn his eyes as she saw them, not like those of a beaten-down teenager, like someone else's. A note beneath the drawing, 4 words. You're not like everyone else. Doyeon folded the sheet, put it in his textbook. During recess, he found Minso at her locker. She was standing there with headphones on, drawing something in a notebook. She saw him. Froze. The pencil stopped mid-line. He took a planner out of his pocket, a new one. He'd bought it yesterday at the stationery store near the station for 800 won. He held it out to her. He said that if it was hard for her to speak, she should write, that he would read it, that he had plenty of time. Minsu took the planner. She held it with both hands. She looked at him. Her eyes were wide, wet. She opened the first page. She wrote one sentence. Why are you doing this? Doyeon read it. He thought. He took the pen from her. He wrote below her line. Because someone has to. She read it, pressed the planner to her chest, nodded. And for the first time, she didn't run away. She just stood there, silently, with the planner, and it felt normal. There were 2 days left until Friday's meeting with Chul. Doyeon gathered everything he had. A photo from social media. The connection between Hong-gu and An Tae-jin. Song-ho's testimony that Junho was being pressured by outsiders. Information about the racket. Not enough for the police. The police are on Hong-gu's side. His brother is the station chief. Not enough for court. The court demands evidence. But enough for Chol. Because Chol didn't know that Do-yeon knew about the connections to the top. Chol thought he was dealing with a high school kid who could throw a good punch. Do-yeon was going to show him that he was dealing with a man who could see the whole chain. And a man who sees the whole chain is more dangerous than the one who hits the hardest. Sunday, the 12th day in his new body. 22 push-ups, 8 blocks of running. His body was starting to take shape. Not strength, shape. The difference between simply moving and moving correctly. His muscles were memorizing the trajectories. His shoulders were straightening. His breathing was evening out faster. Do-yeon took a shower. He got dressed. He had breakfast with his mother. She was home again. Saturdays and Sundays. The only days he saw her in daylight. She made japchae, glass noodles with vegetables and meat. Do-yeon ate and memorized the taste. Every breakfast with her, he ate as if it were his last. Because in his previous life, he had learned one thing. Nothing lasts forever. And least of all, the things that make you happy. After breakfast, he told his mother he was going out for a couple of hours. She asked where. He replied that he was meeting a classmate. She smiled. For the first time since he'd been here, she smiled when she heard he was going to see someone. The old Do-yeon never went anywhere to see anyone. Do-yeon left the house and walked to the park by the bridge. Not because he was ready to meet Chol. The meeting was set for tomorrow. He was going to scout the area. The park looked different in the daytime. Mothers with strollers, old people on benches, children on the playground. A peaceful world. Do-yeon walked around the perimeter of the park. He memorized the entrances and exits, distances, viewing angles, places where he could stand with his back to a wall, places where he could run. Then he sat down on a bench. He took out his phone. He opened a photo. Honggu, An Tae-jin, Chol. 3 faces, 3 levels of the same system. He thought. The strategy for tomorrow was simple. Show Chol that he knows more than he should. Don't threaten him directly. Make it clear that the information exists and that it could end up in the right hands. Which hands? The press, not the police. The police are bought. But the press? A local newspaper, a small one, independent. The very same reporter who, according to his information, had already tried twice to write about Honggu's ties to the business world and had been stopped both times. If he gave her a lead, one photo, one fact, she would dig up the rest herself. Do-yeon put his phone away.
He stood up. He headed back. Halfway home, his phone rang. An unknown number. He answered. A woman's voice, young. She spoke Korean, but with an accent, a light one, a California accent. Do-yeon recognized that accent instantly, because he'd spoken that way himself for 20 years. The voice said it was Emily Shin from a parallel class, that she'd gotten his number from Dahi, that she needed help with her Korean literature homework. Do-yeon stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Help with homework, the oldest trick in the book. He said he could help. She asked where and when. He said in an hour at the library on Main Street. She said okay. The library, small, quiet, wooden tables, the smell of old books. Do-yeon arrived first. He sat in the far corner. 10 minutes later, Emily walked in. He recognized her immediately, even though he was seeing her for the first time, because she didn't move like the Korean women here, more expansively, more freely.
Her arms weren't pressed against her body. Her gaze was direct, not downcast. An American manner, the one they drill into you from childhood. Look people in the eye, Don't apologize for taking up space. She sat down across from him. She placed her textbook on the table, opened it. Doyeon looked at the page. Poetry from the Joseon era. The same topic as in the first lesson. She said she didn't understand the metaphors, that in America she had excelled in English literature, but Korean poetry was a different world. Doyeon looked at the text. A poem about moonlight about homesickness, about how far away the place you once called home can be. He began to explain, in Korean, and stopped mid-sentence, because he saw how she was looking, not at the textbook, at him, with an expression he'd seen in the mirror every day for the first 5 years in America. Loneliness, longing for a place that no longer exists, misunderstanding, people around you who speak your language but don't understand a word. He switched to English, without warning, without transition. He simply continued the sentence in pure California accent, as if he'd spoken that way his whole life. Emily froze. Her mouth fell open. Her eyes widened. She asked in English who he was. Doyeon replied that he was just a guy. She said that regular guys don't talk like that. Doyeon smiled. They sat there for 2 hours. They spoke in English, about poetry, about literature, about why Hemingway wrote in short sentences and why it works, about how strange it is to be a Korean who thinks in English in a country where everyone thinks in Korean. Emily talked a lot, fast, like someone who had been saving up words for 6 months and had finally found someone to give them to. She said she transferred here because her parents decided she needed to learn about her roots, that she hated the first 3 months, that her name is Gyepo and it sounds like a curse word, that her teachers give her C's in Korean because she makes mistakes when she writes, that in gym class they laugh at her because she plays tennis instead of badminton, that the only person who talks to her normally is Dahi, because Dahi doesn't give a damn about the rules. Doyeon listened, nodded, asked questions, didn't interrupt. And when she fell silent, he said one thing. He said he knew what it was like. Being Korean in the wrong place. Thinking in a language that nobody here needs. Missing the taste of food you can't find. Emily looked at him for a long time. Then she asked quietly how he knew. Doyeon replied that he'd guessed. She didn't believe him, but she didn't press him. They left the library together. It had gotten dark outside. Street lights. Wind. She said she needed to catch the bus. He said he did too. They stood at the bus stop. She was silent. Then she said, "Thank you." Not for the help with literature. Just, "Thank you." Doyeon nodded. Her bus came first. She got on. The doors closed. The bus drove away. Doyeon stood at the bus stop and thought in English. For the first time in 12 days, his native language. The real one. The one he thought in when he was shooting, and when he was praying, and when he was just driving down an empty road after the operation, listening to the radio. His bus arrived 7 minutes later. At home, he ate dinner. His mother talked about a neighbor who had gotten a cat. Doyeon listened. He smiled. Then he shut himself in his room. He took out his notebook. He added a name. Emily Shin. Korean American. Single. Smart. Speaks his language. Literally. He closed the notebook. Tomorrow is Chul. Tomorrow everything will be decided. Either the bluff will work and he'll get some time, or it won't work, and in a week they'll break his ribs in an alleyway. He lay down. He closed his eyes. He counted his breaths, a technique he'd been taught before his first operation. 4 seconds to inhale, 7 seconds to hold, 8 seconds to exhale. On the 3rd cycle, he fell asleep. Monday, the 13th day. The morning was cold, the first frost. The steam from his mouth formed a thick cloud. Doyeon ran along the waterfront and counted his steps. 1,200. 9 blocks. A new record. His lungs burned, but not like before. His body was beginning to accept the strain as normal rather than a catastrophe. 25 push-ups, sit-ups, squats, stretching, a cold shower, breakfast, a note, mom, school, lunchbox on the desk. Hyun didn't turn around. Her ears didn't turn red. She'd gotten used to it, or learned to hide it. During the 2nd class, someone passed him a note. Not from Hyun. Unfamiliar handwriting. Large. Angular. After class. Backyard. Come alone. No signature. Doyeon put the note away. The backyard is the area behind the gym, a blind spot for the cameras, a place where those who get beaten are beaten. He didn't know who the note was from. It could have been anyone. Sunho.
Chol's people. Someone new. He decided to go. But first, the school day. Lunch. The bench. Lunchbox. Rice with salmon and pickled radish. Ha-in had outdone herself. Da-hee sat down next to him, uninvited, as always. She took out her doshik in a cup, ate beside him, silently. Then she said that in 2 weeks there would be a school cultural festival, that her group was performing on stage, that this was their first performance in front of the school, that she's nervous. Doyeon looked at her, Da-hee, the one who's rude to teachers and fights with boys and wears her red hair like a banner. Nervous before a school concert. He asked what kind of band it was. She said it's called Quiet Noise. She plays bass guitar, vocals, keyboards, drums. 4 of them, all girls, all from their school. Doyeon asked what style they played. She said something between indie rock and something she couldn't describe herself. Doyeon nodded. He said he'd like to listen. She looked at him suspiciously. She asked if he was serious or just messing around. He said he was serious. She pulled an earbud out of her pocket. Just one. She handed it to him. He put it in his ear. She pressed play on her phone. Bass. Deep. Warm. A little dirty, just as it should be. Then a voice. A woman's. Quiet, but edgy. Simple words. About an empty house and the sound of rain and a person who left without saying goodbye. Doyeon listened for 30 seconds. He took out the earbud. He said the voice was good, but the bass was too loud in the mix. It was drowning out the vocals. And that on stage she should stand not behind the singer, but to the side. So the sound comes from the side, not from above. Da-hee stared at him. She asked how he knew about stage sound. Doyeon said he'd listened to a lot of live music. It was true. In Afghanistan, after operations, his unit would gather in the hangar and whoever was always playing something. A guitar, a harmonica, once even a violin. He'd learned to hear sound balance not from textbooks, but from hangars in the middle of the desert. Da-hee looked at him for a long time. Then she said he was the strangest person she'd ever met, and that it was a compliment. She stood up. She left. She turned around as she walked away and said the rehearsal was on Thursday after school, in the basement of the music on 3rd Street, if he wanted to listen. Doyeon said he'd come. After school, he went to the backyard, behind the gym, the dead zone. Gia was standing there,
a little girl from second grade. He didn't know her, hadn't seen her before. Or maybe he had, but didn't remember because she was the kind of person you don't notice. 5'5", maybe shorter. A school uniform a size too big. A book in her hands. An old backpack, patched in 2 places. She looked at him. Serious eyes, not childish. The eyes of someone who learned too early that the world is unfair. She said her name was So Jia, that she was from 2A, that she needed to talk to him. Doyeon sat down on a concrete step by the gym wall. He gestured for her to sit down. She sat down. She took a notebook out of her backpack, a thick one, with a worn cover. She placed it between them. She said it was Lee Junho's diary. Doyeon didn't move. He didn't reach for the notebook. He just stared. Jia continued. She said that Junho lived in the neighboring building, that they had known each other since childhood, that he was quiet but kind, that he helped her with her homework when she was 11, that in the last few months before his death, he had changed. He had become someone else. He spoke differently. He moved differently, as if an adult had appeared inside him. Doyeon listened. Her heart beat steadily. But inside, something tightened. Cold. Sharp. She said that after his death, she found a diary. It was lying in the mailbox with a note for her. The note said, "Read. Remember. Don't show it to anyone until the next one comes." Doyeon swallowed. The next one. Jia looked at him, straight on, without fear. She said she saw him stop Sungho in the courtyard, that she saw his eyes, that Junho had been looking the same way these past few weeks, like someone else. Someone who had seen things a 17-year-old boy couldn't see. She said she didn't know how or why, but that they were alike. Doyeon was silent. 10 seconds. 20. Then he reached out and took the diary. He opened it. The first pages were ordinary, school notes, homework, drawings in the margins. Then the middle. The handwriting changed. It became stiffer, the letters larger, the sentences shorter, and the content: tactical diagrams, floor plans of the school, distance calculations, notes on cameras and blind spots. The very same blind spots that Doyeon had calculated himself. And fragments of phrases in English, military English, jargon you won't find in a textbook, terms known only to those who've served. Doyeon flipped through the pages.
His hands were steady, his mind was not. Junho was just like that, a different person, a different life. Different experiences packed into a teenager's body, but he had lost. The last pages. The entries grew fewer, shorter. Despair shone through the lines. He wrote about pressure, not from school, from outside. People who came after class, who waited by the house, who knew he wasn't an ordinary student and wanted to figure out where he got his skills. A gang. Andejin. They found him before he found them. The penultimate page, a list of names. 5 names. People who were involved in the pressure. Chol was second. The last page, 1 sentence in English. This isn't a second chance. This is debt collection. Doyeon closed the diary. He sat there, breathing. Jia sat silently beside him, waiting. He asked if she knew what the last sentence meant. She shook her head, said she didn't know English that well. Doyeon didn't translate it, not now.
He asked if he could keep the diary for a while. She said yes. That was why she'd brought it. Doyeon put the notebook in his backpack. He looked at Jia. Small, quiet, with eyes that had seen too much for a 16-year-old. He asked about her father. She froze. Then she replied that he had died 2 years ago. He was a police officer, killed while on duty. She said it matter-of-factly, without a tremor, like a fact she'd repeated so many times that the words had lost their sharp edges. Doyeon nodded. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't say, "My condolences." He said he'd like to hear about him, if it wasn't too hard for her. Someday, not now, when she was ready. Jia looked at him, and for the first time during the entire conversation, her face changed. Her lips twitched. Not a smile, a shadow of a smile. She nodded, got up, grabbed her backpack, left, quietly, just as she had come. Doyeon sat on the step behind the gym. He held the dead boy's diary
and thought about how there is a mechanism in this world that takes broken adults and puts them into the bodies of broken teenagers, and that the first one to go through it couldn't take it, not because he was weaker, but because he was alone. An hour later, he stood up. He walked toward the bridge, toward the park, toward Chul. The meeting was set for today, Monday. A week had passed. Chul was standing in the same spot, with the same 3, 4. Doyeon approached, alone. He stopped 4 meters away. Chul asked if he had thought about it. Doyeon said yes. He said he wouldn't collect money, and that Chul wouldn't either. Chul laughed. He asked why all of a sudden. Doyeon took out his phone. He opened a photo. He turned the screen toward Chul. Chul looked. He stopped laughing. On the screen was himself. Next to him was An Dae-jin. Next to him was a man in a suit with an expensive watch. Doyeon said he knew who was in that photo, that he knew the connection between An Dae-jin and Representative Park, that he knew about the closed gambling case, that he knew the school racket was the bottom rung of a vertical chain reaching all the way up to the city council. Chul stood and listened. His face was stony. But Doyeon saw it. His breathing quickened. His weight shifted to his front leg, ready for action. But not to attack, to flee. Fear. Not of Doyeon, of what would happen if An Dae-jin found out that a high school student possessed this information. Doyeon continued. He said the information was in a safe place, that if anything happened to him, it would be released. Not to the police, to the press. To a reporter from the city newspaper who had been digging into Hong for 2 years. A bluff. A partial one. The photo was real. The information was real. But there was no safe place. And he knew the reporter only by name from a search result. But Chul didn't know that. Chul stood there weighing his options. Doyeon could see his mind working. Hit him. Take the phone. But the photo could have been copied. Take out the kid. But then the information would get out. Report it to An Dae-jin. But then An Dae-jin would ask how the student found out about the connection, and Chul would be the one to blame. A dead end. Doyeon said he didn't want a war, that he wanted one thing, for the gang to leave the school. Not the city, not out of business, just out of the school. Haesong School is no longer their territory. The kids aren't paying anymore. If Chul agrees, the photo stays where it is. If not, it'll start making the rounds. Chul was silent for 30 seconds. Doyeon counted. At the 28th second, Chul spat. He said the school was a trifle, that he didn't give a damn about school money. Doyeon said he was glad they understood each other. Chul looked at him for a long time. Then he said he didn't know who he was, but that he wasn't a student. He turned around. He left. The 3 followed him. Doyeon stood in the park. His legs were shaking. His hands weren't. His head was clear. His heart was steady. The adrenaline would subside later. Right now, he had won. Not a war, a battle. A small one, a tactical one. The school was free of racketeering, for now at least. Chol might come back. Ande Jin might find out. Honggu might intervene. But today, right now, not a single child in Haesong will pay for the right to go to school. Doyeon headed home. On the way, he stopped at a store. He bought 2 boxes of onigiri, with tuna, no spicy. He got home, put 1 box in the fridge, put the second in his backpack. Tomorrow he'll bring them to Ha-in, because she's been making him lunch for 5 days straight, and she hasn't said why even once. Tuesday, the 14th day. 2 weeks in a new body, 28 push-ups, 10 blocks of running. First milestone, 2 kilometers without stopping. His body was changing, not just his muscles, his posture. He no longer slumped. His shoulders were straight, his chin was up, his gaze was steady. His classmates saw it, and they were afraid. Not of him, of the change. Because a change in a person you've considered trash for 3 years is a mirror that shows you that you're the one who turned him into trash. Doyeon arrived at school, a lunchbox on his desk, onigiri for Hyun in his backpack. During the first break, he walked up to her. She was standing by her locker, sorting through her textbooks. He held out the box. She looked at it and asked what it was. He said it was onigiri, with tuna, not spicy. She froze, looked at him, asked how he knew she had gastritis. Doyeon realized he'd made a mistake. He wasn't supposed to know. In this body's history, there's no reason to know about her gastritis. But he'd seen it, how she winces after spicy food in the cafeteria, how she carries antacid in her bag, how she avoids school lunches with peppers. He read people automatically. It was second nature to him, and he forgot that a 17-year-old boy isn't supposed to notice such things. He said he'd seen the pills in her bag last week, when it was open. A half-truth. Hyun looked at him for 5 seconds, 7. Then she took the box. She said thank you quietly and went to class, quickly. Doyeon saw how she pressed the box to her chest with both hands, just like Minsu pressed her planner. The same gesture, the gesture of someone who has received something and is afraid it will be taken away. During the long break, he found Minsu. She was in the hallway on the windowsill, drawing, headphones, a world where she doesn't exist and where she feels at ease. He sat down next to her. She didn't flinch. She'd gotten used to his presence. Over the course of a week, they'd developed a ritual. He would sit down. She would take out her planner. She would write. He would read. He wrote back. 2 silent people conversing on paper in the middle of a noisy hallway.
Today, she wrote, Dahi said you'd come to rehearsal. He wrote, yes, on Thursday. She wrote, can I come too? He wrote, of course. She wrote another sentence, then crossed it out. Doyeon saw the crossed-out words. I'm glad you're here. She crossed it out, but he read it. He didn't let on that he'd read it. He just sat there beside her, silently. And that was enough. After the 4th period, Sonho approached him, in the hallway, in front of everyone. Doyeon stopped. Sonho stood in front of him. His face was different. Not angry, not frightened, confused. He said he wanted to talk, not here. Doyeon said okay. They went out to the backyard, the dead zone, but this time not for a fight. Sonho leaned against the wall. Doyeon stood across from him. Sonho said that Chol wasn't coming to school anymore, that his people had stopped collecting money, that he didn't know how Doyeon had done it and didn't want to know, but that it changed the situation, because his father would notice.
Doyeon nodded. He waited. Sonho paused. Then he said that his father wasn't the man he seemed to be, that he wasn't just a councilman, that he controlled the city through a construction company and through people most residents never saw, that the school was his territory, that Sonho had grown up his whole life in a house where the only language was force, that his father had beaten him since he was 8, that boxing wasn't a hobby but an order, that every bruise Sonho left on other students was an attempt to prove to his father that he was worthy. Do-yeon listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He just stood there and listened. Because 20 years ago, in another country, another boy had done the same thing. He fought to prove himself. He survived to fit in. He became a weapon in someone else's hands because he didn't know he could be anything else. Sonho fell silent. He stood and stared at the ground. Do-yeon asked what he wanted, not what his father expected of him, not what the school expected of him, what he himself wanted. Sunyo raised his head. He looked at Do-yeon, and for the first time there was no mask on his face. No aggression, no arrogance, no bravado. Just a boy, tired, scared, lost. Sunyo said he didn't know, that no one had ever asked. Do-yeon nodded. He said it was okay, that he didn't have to know right now, but that the first step was to stop being who they were making him into, and to start being who he really was, even if he didn't know who that was yet. Sunyo was silent. Then he nodded, once. It was hard, as if that nod cost him more than any punch in the ring. He left. Do-yeon stood there thinking. Sunyo wasn't angry. Sunyo was broken. Just like everyone in this school. Just like everyone in this city. Broken children of broken parents raising the next generation of broken ones. A cycle. Vicious. Endless. Unless someone intervenes. On Thursday after school, Do-yeon went to Dahi's band rehearsal.
The basement of a music store on 3rd Street. Low ceiling. Bare light bulbs. Walls plastered with posters. The smell of dust and rosin. 4 girls. Dahi with a bass guitar. Black. Heavy. She held it like a weapon and a child at the same time. The lead singer. A quiet girl with long hair. A voice that sounded fragile on recordings filled the basement live like water fills an empty room. The keyboardist, wearing glasses, serious. The drummer, small, angry. She hit the cymbals as if they owed her money. Min-soo sat in the corner on an amp box, drawing. Do-yeon sat down next to her. They played 3 songs. Do-yeon listened. The first was good. The second was better. The third was the one. A simple melody, a bass line that went straight to the heart and stayed there. A voice that told of an empty house and a person who finally returned. Do-yeon listened and thought that in the Congo, after a 3-day operation when they lost 2 men, he had been sitting in a hangar and someone had played something similar on the guitar. Simple, quiet, real. And he had cried, the only time in 20 years. He didn't cry here, but something inside him snapped. Quiet, like ice on a river in early spring. The song ended. Dahi looked at him. She waited. He said that the 3rd song was the reason people went to concerts. Dahi blinked. She turned away. But he saw. She was smiling. A real smile. Not that defiant smirk she wore like armor. Then he gave them advice on their positioning on stage, on sound balance, on how the lead singer should stand relative to the microphone so her voice wouldn't drift off to the side. Dahi listened, took notes. Then she asked how he knew all this. Do-yeon said he'd listened to a lot of live music in different places. Dahi looked at him, said that with every passing day, he was becoming more and more of a mystery.
and that she liked it. After rehearsal, they went outside. Dahi, Doyeon, Minsu. It was getting dark. November had been pressing in with twilight since 4 o'clock. They stood on the sidewalk. Dahi said she needed to run home to feed the dog. Minsu wrote in her diary that it was time for her to go too. They went their separate ways. Doyeon walked home alone. On the way, he stopped at a store. He bought 2 lunch boxes for cooking, blue and white. Tomorrow, he would ask his mom to teach him how to make kimbap. Not for himself, for Dahi, who eats dosirik every evening in her empty apartment. He decided to start leaving her lunches on her desk, just like Ha-in used to leave for him. No signature, no explanation, just food. Because a person shouldn't have to eat alone every day. At home, his mother was already asleep. Dinner was on the table, covered with a towel. Rice, stewed vegetables, fish, a note.
I'm proud of you. I don't know why. I'm just proud. Mom. Doyeon sat at the table. He ate. And for the first time, he thought that if the mechanism that had placed him here ever presented him with a bill, he would pay it, whatever the cost. Because these 2 weeks were worth all 42 years of his first life. Friday of the 3rd week, the 19th day, 35 push-ups, 3 kilometers of running without stopping. His body had crossed the threshold. Not strong, but functional. His muscles responded to commands without delay. Reflexes were beginning to merge with memory. The hands knew where to strike. The legs knew where to go. Breathing kept the rhythm. Doyeon stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at his reflection. His face had changed. Not the features. The features were the same. Thin, sharp, but full. His eyes were no longer the eyes of a dog being beaten. They were the eyes of a man who knew what he was doing. School. A lunchbox from Hyun on the desk. A blue lunchbox with kimbap from Doyeon on Dahi's desk. 3rd day in a row. Dahi pretended not to notice, but the box always came back empty. And yesterday, next to the empty box, there was a cassette, a real audio cassette. He found an old player in his mother's desk drawer. He popped in the cassette, 4 tracks, Dahi's band. A recording from rehearsal. The quality was terrible. The sound was like it was coming from a bucket. But the 3rd track, that very one, about an empty house and a man who returned. On the insert, Dahi had written by hand, "Thank you for not lying. Track 4 is about you." He listened to the 4th track, a bass guitar solo, no words, no vocals, just a melody. Simple, heavy, like the footsteps of a man walking forward without looking back. Doyeon listened to this melody 3 times in a row. Then he put the cassette back in his backpack. During the first class, the Korean literature teacher returned the tests. Doyeon got 87 points. 3rd highest in the class. The teacher looked at him over her glasses with an expression that Doyeon classified as controlled surprise. The old Doyeon used to get a 40, 50 at most. During recess, Ha-in approached him, for the first time, on her own, not by the bench, not by the gate, right in the classroom, in front of everyone. She asked how he'd raised his grade by 40 points in 3 weeks. Doyeon replied that he'd started reading the textbook. She looked at him with that look he already knew, the look of someone who feels they're being lied to but can't prove it. Then she said that on Saturday she'd be studying at the library, from 8 to 12. If he wanted to, he could come. Doyeon said he would. She nodded. She left. His deskmate, the one with glasses, leaned over and whispered that Ha-in had never invited anyone to study with her, that she always studied alone. Always. Doyeon nodded. His inner voice kicked in automatically. Subject Ha-in is exhibiting signs of emotional attachment. Recommended response: give her an onigiri. Confirming: Executing. He suppressed a smile. At lunch, he sat on his bench. 3 people approached him, one after another. First, Min-soo. She sat down next to him, silently. She drew in her notebook. He ate. She drew. Then, Dahi. She plopped down next to an empty lunchbox. She said the kimbap was okay. Not amazing, just okay. Doyeon realized that in Dahi's vocabulary, okay meant the best thing she'd eaten in a month. Then Emily approached, with 2 cups of coffee from the vending machine. She handed one to him. She said in English that the coffee was disgusting, but at least it was hot. Doyeon took it, took a sip. It really was disgusting. The 4 of them on one bench. Min-soo was drawing. Dahi was chewing on an apple. Emily was warming her hands on the cup. Doyeon was eating the lunchbox from Hyun. No one spoke. But no one left. And in that silence was something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Belonging. The feeling that you're sitting where you're supposed to be, with the people you're supposed to be with. He remembered that moment, just as he remembered the taste of his mother's soup, just as he remembered the sound of her singing at night, just as he remembered the melody of the 4th track. After lunch, Sonia stopped him, in the hallway. She was standing by the window, alone. No entourage, no mask. Her face was pale, her eyes were red. She said her driver was in the hospital, a Joshi Jun, the man who had driven her to school since she was 6, who knew what kind of music she liked and what kind of coffee she drank, who was the only one in the family who spoke to her like a person and not like an heiress. A stroke, last night. She spoke calmly, but her hands were clenching the strap of her bag so tightly that her knuckles were white. Doyeon listened. Then he asked which hospital. She named it. City Hospital, 3rd floor, room 12. Doyeon nodded. He didn't say anything comforting. He didn't say everything would be okay, because he didn't know if it would be. After school, he didn't go home. He went to the market. He bought the ingredients. He came home. He took out a pot and started cooking. Tarathuk, rice porridge. Simple, soft, the kind they give to sick people. The kind his mother used to make for him when he was sick as a child, in his first life, in Busan. He remembered the recipe. Rice, water, sesame oil, salt, cook over low heat, stirring every 3 minutes. 40 minutes. He stood at the stove and stirred. His mother came home from work. She saw him at the stove. She stopped in the doorway. She asked what he was doing. He replied that he was cooking for a sick person. She didn't ask for whom. She walked over. She stood beside him. She showed him how to stir properly so the porridge wouldn't stick to the bottom. They stood at the stove together, in silence. Shoulder to shoulder. Doyeon transferred the porridge to a container. He put the lid on. He wrapped it in a towel so it wouldn't get cold. He told his mother he'd be back in an hour. He left. The bus ride to the city hospital took 15 minutes. 3rd floor, room 12. The old man was lying in bed, thin, small. His face was gray. An IV drip, monitors, the quiet hum of the machines. Doyeon walked in. He set the container on the nightstand. The old man opened his eyes, cloudy but alive. Doyeon said he'd brought porridge, that it was still warm. The old man looked at him, didn't recognize him. Of course he didn't. They had never met. Doyeon said his name was Han Doyeon, that he was a classmate, that he knew the Ajoshi was an important person to someone who was important to him. He told him to get well. The old man blinked,
then gave a weak nod. Do-yeon turned toward the door and saw Son-hoo. She was standing in the doorway. Her coat was unbuttoned. Her hair was tousled, not perfect for the first time. She was looking at the container on the nightstand, then at Do-yeon, then back at the container. She pressed her forehead against the doorframe. She closed her eyes and stood there like that. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stood there with her forehead pressed against the cold wood. Do-yeon walked past her, quietly. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. Some moments aren't for words. He left the hospital, got on the bus. He was riding home. Outside the window, the city at night, streetlights, signs, people in jackets, steam coming from their mouths. An ordinary evening, an ordinary life. At home, he lay down on the bed. He took out Junho's diary. He opened the last page. This isn't a second chance. This is collecting debts. Do-yeon stared at that sentence and thought. Junho believed that everything would have to be paid for, that someone would come and present the bill. Maybe he was right, maybe not. But Do-yeon knew one thing.
Even if it's a debt, even if someone comes to collect, he'll pay. Not because he has to, but because every day of this life, every lunchbox, every cup of tea in the thermos, every song on the cassette, every drawing in the notebook, every note from his mother, all of this is worth any price. He closed the diary, put it under his pillow, closed his eyes. In 10 days, the school cultural festival. Dahi will be performing on stage. Min-soo will be drawing in the corner. Hyun will be organizing. Emily will be standing in the crowd, missing home. Jia will be reading a book in the back row. Sona might come, or maybe not. And Do-yeon will be standing among them. Not a protector, not a hero, not a mercenary. Just a person who finally ended up where he was meant to be. Monday of the 4th week, the 22nd day. 40 push-ups, 4 kilometers of running. His body had become a tool. Not perfect, but functional. His muscles responded to commands as they should. A right-handed punch came out with a speed that surprised even him. His body was young, and youth compensated for what mass lacked. Fast, flexible, recovering overnight. At 42, he had dreamed of a body like this. At 17, he got it. School. Morning. The hallways were buzzing. The school cultural festival was in a week. Posters on the walls, rehearsal schedules. Teachers were running around with folders. Students were carrying props. Hyun was coordinating everything. She stood in the center of the hall with a tablet, giving instructions. Her voice was steady, her gestures precise. Every decision in half a second. Do-yeon watched. She was beautiful. Truly beautiful. Not like a student, like a commander. If she had been born in a different place and at a different time, she would have been a staff officer. He walked over, asked if she needed help. She looked at him, thought for a second, then said she needed someone to check the electrical wiring on stage, that the school electrician was on vacation, that no one knew how to hook up the sound equipment. Do-yeon said he'd figure it out. He figured it out in 20 minutes. Field wiring at the camps was more complicated. Generators, transformers, distribution panels. A school stage with 3 microphones and an amplifier was first-year basic training level. He hooked everything up, checked the sound, set up the monitors. Dahi came for the sound check and stared at him. She asked where he'd learned to set up monitors. Do-yeon said he'd watched videos online. Dahi said he was lying, but she said it with a smile. First rehearsal on stage. The band, quiet noise. 4 girls. The sound in the school auditorium sounded different, louder, clearer. The lead singer was nervous. Her voice trembled on the high notes. Dahi played harder than necessary. Tension. Do-yeon sat in the empty hall and listened. After the run-through, he approached Dahi. He said 3 things. First, don't play for the audience on stage. Play for Minsu. She'll be sitting in the front row. Look at her. Everyone else will disappear. Second, tell the singer not to reach for the microphone. The microphone should come to her. She's the star, not it. Third, save the 3rd song for last. It's the strongest one. The audience should leave with that song in their heads. Dahi listened. Seriously, no smirk. Then she nodded. She said she'd do it. During the break, Do-yeon found Jia. She was sitting in the library, alone, with a book, as always. He sat across from her. He put Junho's diary on the table. He said he'd read it, all of it. Jia closed the book. She looked at him. She waited. Do-yeon said that Junho was just like him. He didn't explain how. He didn't mention reincarnation. He just said they were alike. That Junho saw the world the same way, thought the same way, acted the same way. And that he was broken not because he was weak, but because he was alone. Jia was silent. Then she asked what the last sentence in the diary meant. Do-yeon hesitated. He translated it. It's not a second chance. It's a debt collection. Jia repeated it to herself, silently. Her lips moved. Then she asked if he believed it. Do-yeon replied that he didn't know, that he didn't have an answer yet, but that he was searching. Jia nodded. Then she said she wanted to tell him about her father, if he was ready to listen. Do-yeon said he was ready, and she began, in a quiet voice, steady. Her father, So Yeon-jung, was a beat cop in their neighborhood. Short, calm, the kind of person who greets everyone on the street and remembers the names of all the neighborhood kids. He died 2 years ago. A night shift. A call about a domestic dispute. A drunk man with a knife. Her father went in first, without a bulletproof vest, because there were only 3 bulletproof vests in their precinct, and there were 4 officers on duty. The knife hit his femoral artery. The ambulance took 23 minutes to arrive. He passed out in the car. Jia was telling the story, and her voice didn't waver. She was stating facts, dates, numbers. 23 minutes. It was her way of holding on, turning pain into data. Do-yeon knew that method. He'd done the same for 20 years. She spoke for 40 minutes, about how her father taught her to ride a bike, about how he smelled after his shift, soap and leather from his belt, about how he tied his shoelaces in a double knot because his mother taught him that way as a child and he never unlearned it, about how he laughed, loudly, loud enough for the whole building to hear, about how on the last evening before that shift, he brought her a pastry from the bakery by the station, strawberry, her favorite. Do-yeon listened, every word, every detail, and he recorded it in his head. Not on paper, not yet on paper. When she fell silent, he said that her father had been a good man, not a great one, not a heroic one, a good one. The kind of good that doesn't make the newspapers, but that keeps the world in place. Jia looked at him. Her eyes were shining, but she wasn't crying. She said she was afraid of forgetting, that every month she remembers a little less, that she can no longer hear the voice in her head, that the face is fading. Doyeon said he would help. She asked how. He said he didn't know yet, but that he would find a way. During the long break, Emily came up to him with her phone. She showed him the screen. Messages from her parents, in English. Her mother wrote that she missed her. Her father wrote that he was proud of her. Emily stood there holding the phone, and her face looked as if these messages were both warming and burning her at the same time. Doyeon read them. Then he asked in English when she last ate a proper American meal. She laughed. She said 6 months ago, at Incheon Airport, a McDonald's burger, and that it didn't count. Doyeon said they were going to Seoul on Saturday. She asked why. He said he knew a place, the only decent Mexican restaurant in Korea. He'd found it 3 days ago online. Reviews from American expats. Everyone wrote the same thing. Tastes just like home. Emily looked at him. Then she said he was crazy. Then she said she was free on Saturday. The rest of the week was spent preparing for the festival. Doyeon helped with the equipment. He carried chairs. He fixed a microphone stand that someone had broken. He checked the schedule. Hyun gave orders. He carried them out. They worked as a team and never clashed, like two mechanisms that fit together perfectly. She gave the task. He did it. No questions, no clarifications. She noticed. After one of the preparation evenings, when everyone had left and the two of them were stacking chairs in the hall, she stopped. She set down a chair and said that he was the first person who did what she asked without arguing or asking for clarification or pretending he knew better. Doyeon set down his chair. He said she was a good leader, that you don't ask a good leader for clarification. She looked at him in the empty hall. Only the nightlight was on. Half her face was in shadow, half in warm yellow light. She said quietly that she was tired, not from the festival, from everything, from the schedule, from the grades, from her parents who ask about her rankings every night, from the fact that she can't remember the last time she did something just because she wanted to. Doyeon listened. Then he asked what she wanted to do, right now, if she could. She thought for 10 seconds. Then she said she wanted to eat ice cream. Just ice cream. From the store. The cheapest kind. Because the last time she'd had ice cream was when she was 12, and since then her mother had banned sweets for the sake of her figure and skin.
Doyeon said, "Wait." He left the room. He returned 5 minutes later, with 2 cups of ice cream from the school vending machine. Vanilla, the cheapest kind, 700 won a cup. He handed them to her. She took them, opened the lids, scooped some up with a spoon, put it in her mouth, and closed her eyes. She stood there like that for 5 seconds, with her eyes closed, with a spoon in her mouth, in the empty school hall. Doyeon ate his ice cream and watched her, and thought that in the Congo he'd once seen a child taste chocolate for the first time in his life. The same closed eyes, the same face. A person who, for a moment, forgets everything. They finished their ice cream, threw away the cups. They pushed their chairs back. They left the school. She stopped at the gate. She said thank you. He said, "You're welcome." She said it wasn't for the ice cream. It was for asking what she wanted. Then she left. On Saturday, Doyeon and Emily boarded the commuter train at 6 in the morning, 2 hours to Seoul. Emily talked the whole way, in English, about school in Lhasa, about her friends who write to her every day, about her father who works as an engineer at SpaceX, about her mother who teaches Korean at a community college and who decided that her daughter should know her roots. Doyeon listened, nodded, laughed, genuinely. Because Emily was funny, not on purpose.
She was just describing a Korean school through the eyes of an American teenager, and every observation was both accurate and absurd at the same time. The restaurant was in Itaewon, small, a Mexican flag on the wall, the menu in English and Spanish. A smell that Do-yeon recognized from 20 meters away. Corn tortillas, grilled meat, jalapenos, limes. They ordered burritos, big ones, with beef and guacamole and sour cream and rice and beans. Emily took a bite, chewed, and cried. Not loudly, not sobbing, just tears streaming down her cheeks while she kept chewing. She said through a mouthful that it was silly, that it was just a burrito. Do-yeon said it wasn't a burrito. It was home. She nodded, didn't lift her head, finished eating, wiped her eyes with a napkin, looked at him, said in English that she didn't know who he was, but that she was glad he was there. They were riding back on the train. Emily fell asleep. Her head fell onto his shoulder. Light, warm. Do-yeon sat there, motionless, for 2 hours. Autumnal Korea flashed by outside the window. Fields, mountains, small towns. He looked at it all and thought that in his first life he had traveled through 12 countries and hadn't remembered a single landscape. But he would remember this one. Wednesday, Culture Festival Day. The 26th day in his new body. Haesong's school looked different. Garlands along the hallways, posters on the walls, tables with food at the entrance, the smell of fried pancakes and cotton candy, music from the speakers, students in casual clothes, teachers in good spirits. One day a year when the school pretends to be a happy place. Do-yeon arrived at 7. He checked the stage. Wires, microphones, monitors, everything was working. Hyun was already there, tablet in her hands, a list in her head. She was coordinating 20 people at once and telling each one exactly what they needed to do. Do-yeon walked over. He handed her an onigiri in a bag. He said she'd forget to eat. She took it without looking, shoved it into her peck. In 3 hours, he would see that the bag was empty. The day was going according to schedule. Contests, performances, dancing, karaoke. Do-yeon moved between the hall and the courtyard, helping, carrying, fixing. He kept an eye on things. By lunchtime, the courtyard was packed. Parents, guests, a reporter from the local paper. Do-yeon spotted her in the crowd, a young woman with a notebook, the very one who had been digging into Hong for 2 years. He remembered where she was standing, 3rd row, right side. The band Quiet Noise was performing at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the last act on the program. Do-yeon stood behind the stage. Dahi was warming up her fingers, quickly, nervously. The vocalist was breathing deeply. The keyboardist was checking the settings. The drummer tapped her sticks on her knee. Minsu sat in the front row, a notebook on her lap, a pencil in her hand, ready to draw. Emily stood by the wall, arms crossed. Jia sat on the back bench, with a book, but the book was closed. Hyun stood at the entrance to the hall. Her tablet was lowered. For the first time that day, she wasn't working. She was just waiting. Sona sat in the second-to-last row, alone, in an expensive coat. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was calm. She had arrived. Do-yeon approached Dahi. He said one thing. "Play for Minsu." Dahi nodded. She walked onto the stage. 4 girls, a band from a provincial town. In front of a hall packed with students, parents, and teachers. Dahi stood at the microphone. She said they were Quiet Noise, and she began. The first song. The hall listened. Not everyone, Some were chatting. Some were chewing. That's normal, a school concert. The second song. The hall fell silent. The singer caught the vibe. Her voice filled the space, steady, clear. Dahi played while looking at the front row, at Minsu. Minsu was drawing, quickly, without lifting her pencil. Third song, the last one, that very one, about an empty house and a man who returned. The bass came in first, deep, warm, then the voice, then the keys, then the drums. The hall fell silent, completely. 200 people, silence, only music. Do-yeon stood behind the stage and listened, and in the middle of the song, something happened that he couldn't have foreseen. A guy walked onto the stage, from the side aisle, the singer's ex-boyfriend. Do-yeon recognized him from Dahi's description. Tall, angry face, a bucket in his hands. He was walking toward Dahi, fast, determined. Do-yeon reacted in half a second, a step forward, toward the edge of the stage. But he was too late. The guy splashed the water, a full bucket, right on Dahi. She stood there, soaked. Water dripped from her hair. Mascara ran down her cheeks. The bass guitars slipped from his hands. The music cut off. The audience gasped. Then someone laughed. One person, then another, then another. Laughter rippled through the rows. Not everyone, but enough. Dahi stood on stage, soaked, with smudged mascara. And for the first time in her life, she didn't know what to do. Her arms dropped, her shoulders slumped. She stood there, motionless. Do-yeon walked onto the stage, calmly, without rushing, without aggression, at a normal pace. He approached the sound booth. He picked up the microphone. He turned to the audience. Silence. 200 pairs of eyes. He said the girl on stage was his sister. Dahi, standing behind him, raised her head. He continued. He said that the person who had poured water on her would apologize in a minute, loudly, in front of everyone. A pause. He looked at the guy with the bucket. He was standing a meter away from him. The smirk hadn't faded yet. Do-yeon said that if there was no apology, he would tell everyone present, including the principal and the reporter from the city newspaper sitting in the third row on the right, that 3 months ago, a student named Lee Jun-ho had died at this school, and why he died, and who had driven him to it. The silence became palpable, like a wall. Do-yeon wasn't looking at the boy. He was looking out at the room, at the principal, who was sitting in the second row and whose face had turned gray, at the reporter, who had already opened her notebook, at the teachers, who had frozen, at the parents, who were exchanging glances. The boy with the bucket stopped smiling. He looked at Do-yeon. He looked at the auditorium. He looked at the principal. Do-yeon waited.
5 seconds. 10. On the 12th second, the boy lowered his head. He mumbled an apology, quietly. Do-yeon said into the microphone that he couldn't hear him. The boy repeated it louder. "I'm sorry." Do-yeon put down the microphone. He took off his school jacket. He draped it over Dahi's shoulders. He said to her quietly, so only she could hear, "Finish the song. You're the best today." Dahi looked at him, wet hair, smudged mascara, his jacket on her shoulders. She picked up the bass guitar, turned toward the band. She nodded, and they played the third song to the end, from the beginning, all the way through. Dahi played with wet hair and in someone else's jacket, and the singer's voice trembled, not from fear, but from something else, something stronger than fear. The hall was silent until the last note, Then applause, not polite, real. 200 people, on their feet. Doyon stood behind the stage, with his back to the wall, arms crossed. He wasn't clapping, he was just watching.
At Dahi, who was standing on stage for the first time in her life and wasn't defending herself. At Minsu, who was drawing in the front row and smiling. At Hyun, who was holding a tablet and not looking at it. At Emily, who was clapping and shouting in English. At Jia, who had closed her book and was watching the stage. At Song-Hu, who was sitting in the second to last row and had a single tear running down her cheek. Just one. After the concert, the principal approached him. He asked him to come to his office on Monday. His face was grim. His voice was steady, but his hands were clenched behind his back. Doyon nodded. Lee Jun-ho. The name echoed throughout the hall. In front of the reporter, in front of the parents. The principal knew that the silence was over. Doyon knew it too, and he knew that Monday would be tough. Monday after the festival, the 29th day. Doyon walked to school and felt the difference. The air was the same, the streets were the same.
The bus was the same, but the school was different. At the gate, students were looking at him. Not all of them, but many. Some nodded, others looked away. Still others whispered. Lee Jun-ho's name echoed through the hallways like a draft that couldn't be stopped. The principal's office. 9 o'clock in the morning. Principal Hwang Chun-sik, a man in his 60s, graying temples, suit, tie. The office was large, diplomas on the walls, photos with officials, awards, a display of success. Sitting next to the principal was Vice Principal Che. His face was stony. The principal began. He said that Doyon's behavior at the festival was unacceptable, that public accusations without evidence constitute slander, that the name of the deceased student must not be used to exert pressure, that the parents of the victims are outraged, that the school board is considering disciplinary action. Doyon listened, silently. He let the principal finish speaking. Then he spoke himself, calmly, quietly.
As if in an interrogation where you ask questions rather than answer them. He asked if the principal knew that Lee Jun-ho had been subjected to systematic abuse for 4 months prior to his death. The principal began to say that the investigation had revealed. Doyon interrupted him. For the first time during the entire conversation, he asked if the principal knew that the abuse came not only from students, but also from individuals associated with a youth gang operating on school grounds. The principal fell silent. The vice principal took off his glasses. Doyon continued. He asked if the principal knew that this gang had financial ties to a city council member whose son attends this school. Silence. The principal looked at him. His gaze had changed. No longer that of a superior reprimanding a student. A man who realized that sitting before him was someone he could not control. Doyon said he wasn't demanding anything. He wasn't demanding firings. He wasn't demanding investigations. He wasn't demanding apologies. He was demanding one thing: the truth. A public acknowledgement that Lee Jun-ho did not die from exam stress. That the school knew about the bullying and did not intervene. That the system protected the guilty parties. The principal said that was impossible, that it would destroy the school, that the rankings would plummet, that parents would take their children away, that the teachers would lose their jobs. Doyon said that a school that remains silent about a student's death is already dead, and that the only way to save it is the truth. The principal stood up. He walked to the window. He stood with his back to them. He was silent for a minute. Then he said he needed time. Doyon said he had a week. He stood up. He walked out. Ha-eun was waiting for him in the hallway, she by the wall, with a folder. Her face was pale. She said she had heard. The walls are thin. Doyeon nodded. She said she wanted to help.
That as class president, she had access to the school board minutes. That 3 months ago, there had been a meeting where they discussed Junho's death. That the minutes were signed by the principal. That it stated the committee found no evidence of bullying. That it was a lie. That she had been at that meeting as an observer. And that the committee hadn't interviewed a single one of Junho's classmates. Doyeon looked at her. He asked if she could get a copy of the minutes. She said yes. He said it could be dangerous for her family, for her reputation, for her future. She looked him in the eyes, and for the first time he saw in them neither fatigue nor shame. He saw determination. She said that 3 months ago the boy had died and she had kept silent, that she'd had enough. Doyeon nodded, once. They stood in the hallway and something had changed between them. Not attraction, not affection. Trust. Real. Heavy. The kind that's tested not by words, but by actions.
That same day after school, Doyeon went home and pulled the notebook from under his mattress. He opened a blank page. He began to write. Not diagrams, not names. He wrote down everything Gia had told him about her father. Every detail. The double knot on his shoelaces. The strawberry cake. Soap and leather. Laughter echoing through the entire stairwell. The bicycle. He wrote for 2 hours, in neat, clear handwriting. He organized it by topic. Gia's childhood, her father's habits, shared memories, the last evening. He filled 20 pages. Then he tore them out of the notebook, put them in a new notebook, a blue one, the one he'd bought that morning at the store. On the cover, he wrote a single word. Dad. Tomorrow he'll give it to Gia, so she'll never forget. That evening, Sona called. He didn't know she had his number. She said a Juicy Jung had been discharged, that he was home, that he was eating well, and that he'd asked about the boy who brought the porridge.
Doyeon said he was glad. Sona paused. Then she said her father knew about the festival, that he knew Doyeon had mentioned Junho's name in front of the reporter, that her father was furious, that he was going to take action. Doyeon asked how exactly. Sona said she didn't know the details, but that she'd heard her father calling someone and talking about Doyeon's mother, about her job, about getting fired. The cold, that very one. The spine, Yemen, before the surgery. Doyeon thanked Sonha. She told him to be careful, then she hung up. Doyeon sat on the bed. His mother. They're hitting him through his mother, because that's the only thing he can't protect with his fists and bluffs. His job, money, the apartment, his life. He closed his eyes. He weighed his options. Option 1. Back down. Keep quiet. Let the principal bury the story. His mother will keep her job. Option 2. Keep pushing. His mother will lose her job. They'll lose their apartment. Option 3. Find another way.
Protect his mother before Hong strikes. Option 3. The only one possible. He opened his phone, found a contact. Not from this phone's address book. A number he'd found a week ago while digging through old military veterans' forums. Kang In-soo. A name he remembered from his past life. A fellow soldier. Not a close friend, but reliable. In this world, Kang In-soo wasn't a mercenary. He was a businessman, a successful one, the owner of a logistics company in Seoul. Do-yeon dialed the number. 4 rings. Answer. A man's voice. Middle-aged. Tired, but lively. Do-yeon said his name was Han Do-yeon, that he was 17, that he was calling on a recommendation. Kang In-soo asked what recommendation. Do-yeon hesitated. Then he said one phrase, a phrase they used as a call sign in Syria. Silence. A long one. In-soo asked quietly where he'd heard it. Do-yeon said he couldn't explain over the phone. He said he had a request, a small one. His mother needed a job, a reliable one that couldn't be taken away with a single phone call from a small-town congressman. In-soo was silent for 10 seconds. Then he asked who his mother was. Do-yeon gave her name. He said she was a janitor in an office building, that she worked 3 shifts, that in a few days she would be fired because her son had stepped on the wrong person's toes. In-soo asked why he should help. Do-yeon said because someone had helped him once, and that debts must be repaid. In-soo was silent for another 10 seconds. Then he said his company had an office in a town an hour's drive from Seoul, that they needed an administrator, that the salary was twice what a cleaning lady made, that he could start on Monday. Do-yeon said thank you. In-soo said he wanted to meet with him, in person. Do-yeon said later. In-soo hung up. Do-yeon sat with the phone in his hand. His hands weren't shaking. His heart was beating steadily. His mother was safe. Now he could continue. Wednesday, day 32, 45 push-ups, a 5-kilometer run. His body had plateaued, not as strong as in his previous life, but strong enough to withstand a fight, strong enough to run if necessary, strong enough so that his body wouldn't let him down at the decisive moment. In the morning, Do-yeon arrived at school and sensed that something had changed. Even as he approached the gates, students were standing in groups, whispering, looking at their phones. He entered the courtyard. Hyun was standing by the fountain, without her tablet. Her face was pale. She saw him. She walked over quickly. She said that last night the city newspaper had published an article. A journalist. That one. She had written a piece about the school festival. And at the end of the article was a single sentence about how the name of a student who had died 3 years under circumstances that the official investigation had ruled an accident. One sentence, but enough to light the fuse. By 9 in the morning, the article had been reposted in parents' chat groups. By 10, a Seoul news portal had written about it. By 11, a van with a camera crew from a local TV station was parked at the school gates. The principal locked himself in his office. The vice principal was rushing up and down the hallways. Teachers were whispering in the staff room. Students sat in their classrooms, refreshing their news feeds. Do-yeon stood in the 3rd-floor hallway, looking out the window at the van by the gate. He hadn't planned this. He'd planned to give the principal a week, to give him time, to give him a chance to make the right choice. But the reporter wasn't waiting. She had been digging into Hong for 2 years, and when Junho's name came up in front of her, she got what she was looking for. A lead. And she ran with it. By lunchtime, the scope of the story had become clearer. Junho's parents, who had remained silent for 3 months, gave a statement to a Seoul news site. Junho's mother said her son had been bullied, that she had spoken to the principal twice, that she was told her son was exaggerating, that she trusted the school, that she no longer does. This comment became the top news story of the day. Do-yeon sat on his bench eating the lunchbox Hae-in had packed for him. His hands were still. His mind was working at full speed. Everyone approached him one by one. Dahi asked what to do. He said nothing. Just wait. Min-soo wrote in her diary that she was scared. He wrote back that she wasn't alone. Emily said in English that it was like a movie. He replied that in movies, everything ends in 2 hours. Here, it takes longer. Jia came with Junho's diary. She said that if necessary, she was ready to show it to the reporter. Doyeon said not yet, that the diary was their last trump card. They couldn't play it too soon. Ha-in brought a copy of the report, 3 pages, the school's seal, the principal's signature, the commission's conclusion. No signs of bullying found. Doyeon read it, and every word felt like a blow. The commission didn't find anything, because they weren't looking. He put the report into his backpack. He thanked Hyun. She stood nearby and didn't leave. She said her parents had called. They'd heard about the article. They asked if she was involved. She told them she wasn't. Doyeon looked at her. He asked if she regretted it. She thought for a moment. Then she said no. She said that for the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was doing something real. After lunch, a black car pulled up to the school. An expensive one. Tinted windows. A man in a suit got out of the car. Park Hong-gu. Doyeon watched from the 3rd-floor window. Hong-gu walked across the courtyard like a man who owned every stone beneath his feet. Confident, calm, dangerous. He entered the building. He went into the principal's office. The door closed. Doyeon went down to the 1st floor. He stood by the window opposite the principal's office. He waited. 20 minutes later, the door opened. Hong-gu came out. He saw Doyeon. He stopped. They looked at each other. For the first time. Hong-gu was a large man. Broad shoulders, a square face, small, watchful eyes. The eyes of a man accustomed to assessing others as resources or threats. Nothing in between. He approached, stopped a meter away. Doyeon didn't move. Hong-gu said quietly that he knew who he was, knew what he was doing, knew why, and that he advised him to stop while there was still a chance. Doyeon looked him in the eyes and saw, not anger, not contempt, calculation. Cold, precise. This man wasn't threatening because he was angry. He was warning him because it was more effective that way. Doyeon replied quietly. He said that his mother no longer worked in the building owned by Hong's company, that she had moved to another place, that there was no leverage left. A micro-movement. Hong-gu's right eye twitched.
For a split second. He hadn't expected it. He hadn't expected a 17-year-old boy to make a move before him. Doyeon continued. He said he had a photograph in which Hong-gu stands next to An Tae-jin and a member of a youth gang. He said he had the minutes of the school committee that failed to conduct an investigation. He said he had a student's testimony that would confirm the pressure on Junho came from outside. Doyeon spoke, and every sentence was like a bullet in a chamber, loading, methodically. Hong listened. His face didn't change, but his breathing. Doyeon saw it. It quickened. Half-breaths. Enough. Doyeon said his final words. He said he didn't want to destroy Hong-gu. He didn't want a war. He didn't want a scandal. He wanted one thing. For the principal to go to the press and tell the truth. That the investigation had been conducted with violations. That the school would take action. That those responsible would be held accountable. No names.
No surnames. No mention of Hong-gu in the reports. Just the truth. About old. Small. Enough for Junho's parents to finally hear what they deserved 3 months ago. Hong-gu looked at him. 30 seconds. Doyeon held his gaze. He had held the gazes of far more terrifying people. Field commanders, drug lords, people with machine guns in their hands. A small-town councilman was not the toughest opponent of his career. Hong-gu turned around, left, without saying a word. Do-yeon stood in the hallway. Adrenaline, that very kind, post-battle. Legs weak, hands steady. His head was clear. He didn't know if it would work. Hong-gu might accept the offer. He could double the stakes. He could strike from where Do-yeon least expected it. That evening, Do-yeon came home. His mother was sitting at the table. An envelope lay in front of her. She said she'd received a notice of termination, effective tomorrow. No explanation given. Do-yeon sat down across from her. He took her hand. Small, dry.
Trembling. He said he knew, that he'd already decided everything, that starting Monday, she'd have a new job, better than the old one, closer to home, more money. She looked at him. She said she didn't understand how. He said he'd asked a man for help, a good person. She asked who. He said he'd tell her later. She didn't press him. She just squeezed his hand tightly and sat there like that, in silence. Do-yeon sat across from her, holding his mom's hand, and thought he'd dealt Hong a blow. But he was too late, by 1 day. Sometimes 1 day is all it takes. Friday, the last day before winter break, the 35th day in his new body. 50 push-ups, a 6-kilometer run. The body had become his, not a tool, not a draft. His. His muscles remembered the commands. His reflexes had fused with experience. His arms knew where to go. His legs knew when to run and when to stand. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror. Han Do-yeon's face, but different. Not gaunt or haggard. Full, alive. With eyes that had seen 2 worlds. The morning was cold. The first snow had fallen during the night and lay on the windowsill in a thin white layer. His mother was making him breakfast. She had been working at her new job for 4 days. She came home at 6 in the evening instead of midnight. She cooked dinner. She sat with him at the table. She told him about her new co-workers. She laughed. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard her laugh. She served him rice and soup and said there would be chop-cha for dinner, his favorite. Do-yeon didn't know this body had a favorite dish, but now he did. School, the last day. The hallways were decorated for the holidays, a Christmas tree in the lobby, small, artificial, with cheap ornaments. Do-yeon walked past it. A lunchbox lay on his desk, the last one of the semester. He opened it. Rice, chicken, an egg roll, pickled vegetables, just like the first time. A note. It was under the lid. 4 words. Eat well during the break. Do-yeon put the note in his pocket. With the others. There were 12 of them. He kept every single one. First period. The principal walked into the classroom. Not a teacher, the principal himself. His face was gray, aged 5 years in a week. He stood at the blackboard. The class fell silent. The principal said he had something important to announce, that the school had conducted a reinvestigation into the circumstances of student Lee Jun-ho's death, that the initial conclusion had been erroneous, that the committee had failed to fulfill its duties, that the school offered its apologies to Lee Jun-ho's family, that those responsible for organizing the bullying would face disciplinary action, that he was personally resigning. The class was silent. 30 people. Silence. The principal left. The door closed. The silence lasted 10 seconds. Then someone began to cry, quietly, in the back row. Do-yeon didn't turn around. He was looking at the desk in front of him, and he felt as though something heavy and dark that he had been carrying since the first day was getting lighter. It wasn't disappearing. It was getting lighter. During the break, he went out into the hallway. Zaya was waiting for him. She was standing there with a blue notebook, that one, the word Dad on the cover. She was holding it to a chest with both hands. She said she'd read it all, that he'd written down everything she'd told him, Every detail, the double knot, a strawberry cake, laughter echoing through the entire stairwell, everything. She said she wouldn't forget now, even if she wanted to. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. She stood there holding the notebook and couldn't say another word. Do-yeon nodded. He didn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the only right answer. She left, clutching the notebook to her chest. After the second class, Sonyo approached him, in the hallway, in front of everyone. His face was different, not angry, not confused, calm, heavy.
Like the face of a man who has made a decision and knows it will come at a high price. He said he'd talked to his father last night. For the first time in his life, not as a son to a father, but as one person to another. He told his father it would stop. He wouldn't hit him anymore. He wouldn't collect money. He wouldn't be the person they were making him into. Do-yeon asked how his father had reacted. Sonho said he'd hit him. In the face. Hard. Then he went silently into his study and didn't come out until morning. Sonho turned his face. A bruise on his cheekbone. Fresh. Dark. Do-yeon looked at that bruise and saw another bruise on another face. His own. From his first life. When his stepfather hit him at 13. The same bruise. The same price for the word no. Do-yeon told Sonho one thing. He said that the first no is the most expensive. Everyone after that is cheaper. Sonho looked at him. Then he asked quietly, "Who are you?" Do-yeon didn't answer. He just looked. And Sonyo didn't ask again. He nodded. He left. Lunch. The last one this semester. A bench in the courtyard. A thin layer of snow lay on the ground. Do-yeon sat with his lunchbox. Min-soo approached him, with a notebook. A new one. A big one. She opened it and showed it to Do-yeon. A comic. A whole comic, drawn in 3 weeks. A story about a man who came out of nowhere and stood between those who beat and those who are beaten. The faces weren't drawn in detail, just silhouettes. But Do-yeon recognized everyone. Himself, Ha-in, Da-hee, Emily, Jia, Son-hoo, even Son-ho. He flipped through the pages. Silently. Min-soo sat next to him and waited. On the last page, a silhouette stood in the middle of a group of people. Not in front, not above them, among them. Under the drawing was a single sentence. "You are not alone." Do-yeon closed the notebook. He looked at Min-soo. She was looking at him. And for the first time in all the time he had known her, she didn't look away. Then she opened her mouth and spoke aloud, quietly. Her voice was hoarse, rough from silence, but alive. She said, "Thank you, Do-yeon." 3 words. The first words she'd ever spoken aloud in front of him. He nodded and said nothing, because if he had spoken, his voice would have given him away. The others approached him, Da-hee with a guitar on her back, Emily with 2 burritos wrapped in foil that she'd brought from Seoul that morning, Hyun with a thermos of hot tea, Jia with a blue notebook and Junho's diary. Sona. She stood slightly to the side, in an expensive coat, without a driver, alone for the first time. Do-yeon looked at them. 6 people. 6 girls, each with her own pain, each with her own story, each standing next to him not because he saved them, but because he saw them. He simply saw them, when the whole world looked the other way. The last class was canceled. The break was starting early. The students were dispersing. The hallways emptied. Snow was falling in large flakes outside the window. Do-yeon left the school. 6 people followed him. Ha-in with a thermos, Min-soo with a notebook, Da-hee with a guitar, Emily with a burrito, Jia with a diary, Sona in a coat. A car was parked at the gate. Black. Not expensive, ordinary. Do-yeon's mother was standing next to the car. Kang In-soo had driven her there. He was standing nearby. A man of about 45, sturdy, calm, in a jacket, no tie, an open face, attentive eyes. He was looking at Do-yeon, and on his face was an expression that Do-yeon had seen only once in his life, in the mirror, after his first operation in Syria, when he looked at himself and realized he was no longer the man he had been that morning. In-soo quietly uttered a single word. Marcus. A question, not a statement. Do-yeon looked at him, didn't answer. He walked over to his mother. She was standing there in a jacket, an old one, but clean. Her face was smiling. She held out her arms. Do-yeon hugged her. For the first time in his life, he hugged her for real. Tightly. The way you hug when you're afraid of losing someone. She was small, warm. She smelled of soap and rice and home. He said they should go, that he would make dinner. She laughed, said he didn't know how to cook. He said he had learned. They walked to the car. 6 people followed them, not right beside them, slightly behind, each at their own distance, but all heading in the same direction. Snow was falling in large flakes, white, quiet, as warm as snow can be when you walk among people who care. Do-yeon walked and thought. 35 days, 5 weeks. In his former life, in 5 weeks he'd managed to complete 2 operations and start a third. In this life, in 5 weeks he'd found his mother, found friends, found a purpose, protected those he could. He would have lost without them. They would have lost without him. But together they stood firm, and the school that had been breaking people for 3 years began to crack. Not from force, from the truth. He stopped by the car, turned around, looked at the school. A gray building, a fence, a gate, windows, an ordinary school, an ordinary world. But behind those walls, a boy died because no one stood by him. And another boy, just like Do-yeon, just as returned, just as broken in his former life, tried to change everything and couldn't, because he was alone. Do-yeon took his phone out of his pocket. He opened his notes. That very entry he had changed on the first day. It will be. 1 word. He added another. It will be better. He put his phone away, got into the car. His mother beside him, In-soo at the wheel. 6 of them wouldn't have fit in the back seat, but Da-hee said they'd walk there, and that Do-yeon owed them hot chocolate for it. The car pulled away. Snow, the road, a small town, a bridge over a river, prefab apartment buildings, an ordinary world. His world. Somewhere in Seoul, in a cafe overlooking the Han River, a man was sitting. Do-yeon didn't know who he was. He didn't know that this man was looking at his photo on his phone. He didn't know that this man was smiling. He didn't know that somewhere there was a third person, just like him, returned, alive. He didn't know that the phrase from Junho's diary about collecting debts had a meaning he didn't yet understand. But he could feel it, deep in his spine. A chill. That very one. It's coming. The reckoning is coming. Someone is coming, sooner or later. But not today. Today it's snowing. Today it's Mom. Today it's dinner for 6. Today is the first day of vacation. Today is life. The car turned onto their street. His mother said she'd forgotten to buy onions. Do-yeon said we could manage without them. She said japchae isn't japchae without onions. He laughed. In-soo pulled the car up to the store.
Do-yeon got out. He bought onions, 2 bunches. He got back in the car. His mother took the bag and looked inside. She said he'd bought the right kind. Do-yeon smiled.
He didn't say that he knew this variety of onion because his mother had bought the same one 25 years ago in Busan. Because some things never change. Not in 20 years. Not in 2 lifetimes. The car pulled up to the house. They got out. They went up to the 4th floor. They opened the door. The smell. Home. Kimchi and rice and soap and warmth. Do-yeon took off his shoes, put on his slippers, walked into the kitchen, started cooking. His mother stood beside him. She showed him how to cut the carrots into thin strips. He cut. She corrected him. They stood shoulder to shoulder at the stove in the small kitchen of a small apartment in a small town an hour's drive from Seoul. And outside the window, snow was falling. And somewhere down the street, 6 girls were walking and laughing. And somewhere in Seoul, a man put his phone in his pocket, finished his coffee, and stepped out of the cafe into the snow.
And somewhere far, far beyond what can be understood or explained, someone or something was watching the boy at the stove and the woman beside him, deciding if this was enough or not. Do-yeon didn't know the answer, but he stood in the kitchen, with an onion in one hand, with a knife in the other, with his mother beside him. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, he cared about what tomorrow would bring.